on by down this trail. And then all of a sudden I hear them like yelling in Pashto. And I was like, what the heck? And I look down where they're at and I can see their legs, but I can't see anything more than that because there's like a tree limb hanging down into the trail. And with night vision and stuff like that, you don't have a lot of depth perception beyond stuff like that. So I could see them and I could hear them yelling. I move up and I swing the tree limb out of the way because it was only like 10 feet in front of me. So I move up a little bit and I move the tree limb out of the way. And I can see a dude with an AK standing there right in between these dudes, probably 10 yards beyond them. And so I just came right up the middle between those dudes and smoked that guy because their ROE was that rules of engagement were that they couldn't shoot unless they were shot at first. But it's not that way for us. So, like, if there's a threat, we can kill it. And so as soon as I sweep the limb out of the way, I see a dude with an AK there. So I just come up and I had the MP7 again, which shoots a really small caliber bullet, 4.6 millimeters, super high velocity, but it's like a little small pistol round that shoots a really small projectile that's really fast. So I just come up the middle and I tag this dude. I'm just like, tack, 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 just drop like 8 rounds in his chest. And the dude falls down. Meanwhile, as he's falling down, he squeezes his trigger and a couple rounds went off because those dudes a lot of times keep their rifles on fire. So a couple rounds went off to the ground. And then the Canadian sniper dudes, I don't even know where they went. Those dudes disappeared. I know they dove off to the side and I never saw them again. So then I look over to the left to the target building and I'm like, dang, this is actually a legit fighter camp. Like what our intel said for the first time, it was actually accurate. I'm like, there's guns stacked up the way they would be stacked in like basic training. Like a fighter camp. And then there's dudes like crawling across the ground going to get these guns. And this dude's crawling. I shoot this one dude in the back of the head. He dies. Another dude is crawling towards some guns. I shoot him. And then all of a sudden I see this dude come out of this building and he starts spraying at me with a PKM, which is like a machine gun type thing. He's like holding it like Rambo and like spraying in my general direction. And this dude's probably 10 to 15 yards from me.
Welcome to our 2024 Memorial Day special with 2 of my favorite combat veterans and warriors. Are you ready for this?
So I go in and I go into the room on the first room on the left, and there's one of our dudes in there. He's like dragging himself back into the room. His legs are just dangling and he's just dragging himself back. And I shined him with my tack light, and he was one of our younger dudes in E4. And he was like, "Hey, Sergeant, I'm all messed up." And I was like, "Dude, you gotta treat yourself, man. You gotta do self-aid. I don't have time to treat you right now because your wounds aren't bad enough." You know, like I could tell he was gonna be fine. He just needed to like patch himself up a little bit. So we keep flowing because we got to clear the target. Flow into the next room, and I see my buddy Mike Elliott up there, who's the other squad leader. He's like just kind of leaned up against the wall. And like he's holding his arm, and like there's blood like streaming out of his arm. And I hit him with my light, and I'm like, "You good to go?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm good. And so then I roll out of there and leave him. Go into the next room. As I'm getting ready to go in the next room, I hear like this. It sounds like a grenade, tink, 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 rolling across the ground. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm getting ready to go through this room, and a grenade literally like rolls right up to my feet in the front of the door. And I had it seemed like I had like 10 minutes to make this decision. But I'm seeing this grenade, mind you, behind me, about 5 feet behind me, is my roommate and one of my Ranger buddies laying down, getting treated by the doc because he's got grenade shrapnel, and all over his legs. His body armor has been taken off because that's the only place they can treat him at right now. And I'm trying to clear this. So I'm like, I can't let this grenade blow up right here.
As you all know, I have never had trouble developing a monologue or an introduction with plenty of talking points. This one has been somewhat tough for me. I don't know that I have the words to describe how badass our U.S. military members are, past, present, and future. I want to be very, very clear that I do not support the selfish decisions made by our bureaucrats to send troops, our troops, to fight in wars that are created to fund their kickback schemes. The general public is lied to as politicians send our country's very best into terrible situations. But I also want to be very clear that I support everything our troops do when called upon. After giving a talk in Springfield, Missouri this past March of 2024, a gentleman came up to me afterwards and he introduced himself as a Drop-Tine Innovator podcast member. I later found out he was a Marine, but he didn't mention this at first. As he shook my hand, he left a challenge coin in my hand. Those of you who have received such a token of appreciation from a veteran know just how much they mean. This was my first coin, my first challenge coin, but I can tell you that this coin means a lot to me. I'm not sure if I deserve such appreciation from an American hero who risked his life for our country, but it was the highlight of my entire trip. Many times when in battle, one could reasonably argue that our troops are not fighting for freedom. They're fighting to make sure all of their brothers and sisters get out of there alive. They have each other's backs, and they know they're there to fulfill a mission. They don't worry about agreeing or disagreeing with that mission. They just get it done. And they do all they can to get everyone out alive. If you ever truly dive into freedom and what it truly means, and what our founding fathers considered freedom to be, we're losing every version of it day by day in this country. This isn't just a recent thing. It's been going on for generations. This fact does not detract from the sacrifices that our brave men and women of the U.S. military make. This conversation about our country is guaranteed to sound very different than most you will hear this Memorial Day. However, you should know that the two brave men on the other end of the line fought when called upon, and they love their country. They are the very best of the best. And I'm proud to call them my friends. And I'm super proud to introduce you to some topics that perhaps you never really thought about or heard on such a special day. Now, before Mike tells his combat stories and experiences while fighting for the U.S., you may want to grab someone to listen or share this podcast episode. His bio is quite extensive and actually mind-blowing. Not only is he a combat veteran several times over, he's accomplished the most elite level of American warrior. He's a ranger. It doesn't matter how great of a hunter you think you are. I can assure you, you would not want Mike tracking your ass. As the U.S. military is concerned, Mike is in a very small group of accomplished killers and warriors. The truth is, you won't meet many who have seen as much intense, up-close combat as Mike. When 9/11 happened, Mike had 3 years of service in the Army, and he was stationed in Korea. He enlisted for service in the 75th Ranger Regiment as rifleman, fire team leader, and an assault squad leader on several combat deployments. Mike was wounded in a battle in Tel Afar, Iraq in 2005, and he received the Purple Heart and the Silver Star medals. Mike taught tactical shooting, advanced demolitions, and evaluated personnel for entry into the nation's premier raid force, the 75th Ranger Regiment. Mike was then selected to the U.S. military's smallest and most secretive Special Mission Unit, the RRC. After being selected for this unit, Mike attended the arduous 11-month-long training where RRC teams are required to walk up to 40 miles in mountainous terrain with combat packs weighing in excess of 100 pounds. Mike has commanded a fighting force of as many as 700 fighters as the senior U.S. advisor in the Horn of Africa. After being promoted to Master Sergeant in 2011, he finished his time as an RRC assistant team leader, and in 2013, he assumed the position of Mortar Platoon Sergeant for the 3rd Ranger Battalion, where he advanced the training level of the Ranger Mortar Section, making them much more versatile. In 2015, he moved to Yuma, Arizona, where he was assigned as the officer in charge of the Free Fall Parachutist course, the Jump Master course, and he taught the instructor course before retiring in 2019. After his military service, Mike trained the most elite operations units as a contractor in basic and advanced military free fall tactics, including body flight, canopy flight, and tactical employment. He himself accumulated a total of 5,000 jumps, and he also trained and evaluated SEAL teams in surveillance techniques. He's currently the director of VIP security for USPA Nationwide Security, where he manages and advises the safety and protection of high-profile individuals and events. Mike's also the founder of Project Exodus Relief, a volunteer group organized to evacuate Americans and Afghan SOF. Mike has been outspoken on the events surrounding the disastrous withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan and the corruption in Ukraine. And he's been on many television programs and articles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, and many, many more that you've heard of. Quite honestly, his bio is extremely extensive. He's an impressive individual, and he's definitely one of one. Now, Zach is a close friend. He's a farmer, he's a rancher, and he's my partner in crime in the seed business. Zach fought in Iraq, and he knows what honor, respect, hard work, and loyalty mean. If I could choose a brother, he'd make the cut. In fact, sometimes we're too much alike, and those of us who pick up our slack, I guess you could say, will agree as we focus on our missions. Zach wants success for others just as much as he wants his own success, and he's always willing to help out. In fact, my unfortunate prior experience with a completely dishonorable, disrespectful, and disgraceful leader of a cover crop seed company in Bladen, Nebraska, led me to find people in the seed industry who demand better, possess loyalty and honor. Zach's military and combat experience taught him how to be a man, how to work as a teammate, and never expect all of the glory, and, quite honestly, how to treat people with respect and dignity, something that many Americans lack today. Zach's a great husband, he's a great father, and I'm honored that he has my back, and he should know that I have his. Enjoy.
Yeah, I started off, grew up like most normal kids in the country in Alabama, just running around the woods doing stuff. And then, we grew up kind of tough, we didn't have a whole lot of money. So we had to figure out ways to have fun, which I think helps build your thoughtfulness, you know what I mean? Like your problem solving skills, because you're always trying to figure out a way to jump this or create a ramp to jump over that or how to get up this tree or whatever. So the problem solving skills got built as a kid. And I think that helped me out later in life. Plus, just being out in the woods. I mean, we'd go out in the woods and be outside all day long with nothing to eat or drink, and then come back at the end of the day. So like doing that kind of stuff, I think sets you up for some of the challenges that you'll encounter in the military. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I'm anything special or anything unique about me. I just I did happen to spend a significant amount of my time in the 75th Ranger Regiment, which is hard to do. It's one of the hardest units to stay in. A lot of people don't realize that, but like, Navy SEALs and like special forces and guys like that, they have their own MOS. So when you go to assess at those units, you transfer to a new MOS code, like, which is a job title. So it's really hard for them to get rid of you after that. So the Ranger Regiment did it differently. They decided to keep all the standard base MOSs for the soldiers. So that way, if you get to the Ranger Regiment, they could kick you out at the drop of a hat. It doesn't matter how long you've been there. So the bad thing is a lot of guys kind of get booted sometimes that probably shouldn't be booted. But it's a hard place to stay there, and especially stay there for, I think, like 14 straight years is what I did from the time I got there until, well, technically, including my time out at the free fall school, I was technically still under the regiment. So I guess about 17 years total in the Ranger Regiment. So I think that's the only thing unique about me. There's other guys that have done it, plenty of other guys that have done it, but it's a pretty unique thing, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what does all that mean? I mean, where all have you been serving your country, by the way?
I've been to Iraq, Afghanistan. I've been to Somalia and some other countries in Africa. I've been all over the world training, like training tons of like we train all the time out west. But as far as like combat stuff, just Iraq, Afghanistan, been across the border into Pakistan, been into, Somalia, Djibouti, different places like that. It's pretty much it, I guess, as far as combat.
Nice. Zach, how about you?
I was actually fortunate. I got to go to a lot of different countries. We went to Japan, Okinawa, went to Kuwait, Iraq, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Jordan, went to Spain, went to France, went to Germany, went to Amsterdam. Now, Amsterdam, we just kind of passed through, but got to stay in Amsterdam for a minute. So I think all said and done, I think I went to 17 different countries while I was in, somewhere around there.
Dude, that's awesome, man. That's one of the cool things about the Navy is you definitely get to see the world in that place, man. And I forgot, I went to Korea too. I went to Korea. I also went to Thailand as well. Almost forgot about those two. Not for combat, but just training.
That's what we got picked up on debts, like if you got a certain debt. And just when we went to, during the invasion into Iraq, on that trip alone, on that tour, I think I went to like 10 different countries just in that tour alone. But we got to go build a helo pad in Jordan. We were fortunate enough to go down to Petra, Jordan, which was the most amazing trip in the world. Got to go to Petra, went on a mission over to Oman, right on the border with Yemen. Went to Masira, which is a small island off the coast of Oman. Then I was stationed out of Bahrain and went back and forth between, Oman, Jordan, so on and so forth. And it was pretty neat. First time I ever been shot at in the air when we were coming into Baghdad International, which at that time was still Saddam. And the loadmaster from the C-130 comes back and he's like, "Hey man, look out the right side of the plane. There's fucking tracer rounds coming up at us." I was like, "What?" I don't like flying anyway. Look out, there's all these freaking tracers coming up. I was like, "Dude, this sucks." They're like, "Hey, we're going to do a combat landing." I was like, "What's a combat landing?" They're like, "You're about to find out." I was like, "Oh my gosh." So just something stupid that was just, for me at the time, was insane. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never want to get on another plane again."
That makes flying American Airlines seem like kindergarten.
Oh, like a cakewalk, yeah. And Mike, you remember in the C-130s, all they have is those freaking cargo nets?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They suck. I've jumped out of them things a ton. But dude, speaking of that, coming in like that, in Iraq, well, when we jumped in for the invasion of Iraq, it was kind of like that. We were hanging out in Saudi Arabia for a little while. We were planning different targets we were going to hit. And they were doing the pre-assault fires, like they were bombing a bunch of stuff, and fighters were going and bombing stuff. We were hanging out in Saudi Arabia, and
Grant's eyes
we
lit
get
up,
on the
and he's
plane.
got a big grin on his face. I'm not sure why, but
we got on the planes, we loaded up, and we were doing a combat jump into Iraq. So like that's how. But my first day in combat was like I jumped out of an airplane into Iraq. And so we were flying in super high, like 35,000 feet or whatever. And then we flew all the way into Iraq that high. And then we jumped in out on the Western Desert on an airfield called H1. And the plane dove from like 35,000 feet. Like they were telling us like, hey, there's a lot of anti-aircraft fire and stuff like that. So we're going to be going at high altitude. The plane's going to take a steep dive and pull up right at jump altitude. So they dove down super low and then pulled up. And I think, I don't know exactly what the official number is, but we jumped super low. Typically, a low jump is like 800 feet. But from what I've heard, we jumped at like 500 feet.
Oh, God.
Which is, for a static line jump, that's super low. Like, you don't even need a reserve because there's no chance of getting it out. You're just out, boom, parachute opens, couple seconds, bam, and you're on the ground. So that's the way we jumped and broke a ton of dudes. But your story talking about the fire reminded me of that because it was the most miserable jump. This plane dove. Mind you, we've got 100-pound rucksacks on, plus another probably 100 pounds worth of parachute gear, plus our rifles and ammo and stuff like that. So we're standing there with probably around 200 pounds of extra gear strapped to our body to jump into a combat mission. And so imagine the G-forces as this plane dives and then pulls up. So like it's pulling up and leveling off, and it's literally just driving us into the floor of the aircraft. We're trying to stand. We're hooked up to the static line cable, to the anchor line cable. And then dudes are like literally hanging on. I remember the cable was like bending down low because there was so much weight with dudes hanging onto it, trying not to fall on the floor. And then the doors open up and they're like, go, 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 go. And we just start jumping out of the plane.
See, I didn't have to jump. We were coming in, like we were flying over the desert. It was a beautiful day. You could see for freaking miles. I bet I saw 5 different countries just from flying in. And then when they came back and they're like, hey, we're going to do a combat landing. I was like, all right, whatever, like, what's that? And they're like, oh, you're going to find out. And that thing literally, like, I didn't know a C-130 could do this. Like, it just went straight down. I was like, holy shit. I looked over at my buddy Josh Davis was sitting next to me, and his eyes are like as big as saucers. He's like, holy crap. And we leveled out over the buildings and then dropped into Baghdad. I was like, holy shit. We got off the plane and they're like, all right, everybody off. And you got to walk around and check for bullet holes. We were like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, I mean, you got to check for bullet holes. We're like, okay. Walked around, checked for bullet holes, dropped off the contractors that were on the plane with us. And they're like, all right, we're going to do a combat takeoff. I'm like, I'm assuming that this is the same thing as a combat landing, just in reverse. And they're like, yep, you got it. Take off, just low over the buildings, and then freaking C-130 straight up in the air. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. I'm about to freaking throw up.
Well, you said you didn't know they could do that. What was crazy is when I flew out of, it was out of Baghdad. Or no, it was out of Kuwait, actually. It was out of Kuwait the first time. We jumped in out in the Western Desert. We were out there for like 2.5, 3 months, and then we rolled out through Kuwait. And I remember, but we flew a commercial airline. Speaking of other flights, this was crazy. So we get on the plane. It's all civilian stewardess or whatever on the plane. It's a chartered airline. This is the only time I flew like this. The rest I flew military flights or commercial civilian flights. But this one was a chartered civilian flight. And our platoon sergeant went up to the cockpit and was like, hey, can I get my Rangers up in the cockpit? Let's set a Guinness Book of World Records and see how many people we can cram in a cockpit on takeoff. And the pilot was like, all right. So, dude, I was in there. I don't know if you know how big the cockpits are in some of these bigger planes. It's pretty big. We had probably 18 dudes crammed into this cockpit with the pilots while they're taking off. We ain't seatbelted in, dude. We're standing in the cockpit with the door open because we can't even shut the door. There's so many dudes in there. I think we got like 18 or 20 dudes in there. Like I was literally smashed up over the pilot, like the pilot on the left, I was over his shoulder, like with my shoulder in the back of the nape of his neck, like leaning over just to try to make space for other dudes. That's how packed it was. But here's the crazy thing. I didn't know a 727 or 737 or whatever that was we were on could fly like that. Dude, this thing took off down the runway and popped straight up like a rocket. And I was like, oh my God, this thing's pulling some G's. And I'm trying to hang on to the seat so I'm not falling back out of the cockpit. But it was the craziest thing. That I thought was a pretty cool experience, and that just reminded me of it. I don't think I know I haven't told that on any podcast before, but that was pretty cool. I figured I'd bring that up.
When we went to Kuwait, we did the same thing. We flew out of LA on a chartered flight, and now they didn't let us get in the cockpit on takeoff. We're all sitting there and everything. I think I told Jason this story. We're getting on the plane. I'm a lowly E3, getting on the plane, and everybody's going back to coach. And there was like 4 people in front of me, and coach was full. And they're like, all right, you guys turn left. We went left. I got to fly all the way to Kuwait with my buddy Parker Cutchin and Scott Moore in freaking business class as lowly ass E3s. I was like, this is freaking awesome. And then once we got in the air, they're like, hey, once we get in the air, everybody can come up and, visit the cockpit. So once we got up to, whatever, 35,000 feet, they're like, everybody can come up just, a couple at a time and so forth. So after a while, we got to make our way up there, and it was like we were flying out over the Atlantic at that time, and you got to sit in the cockpit with the pilots, and they were just like, they were so gracious and like excited for us for what we were about to go do. But we thought it was awesome what they were doing at the same time. Like, man, this is crazy. You guys get to do this every day.
Yeah, it was kind of the same for us, man. And, at that time, in early 2003, I'd been on some planes, like I'd flown in some civilian airliners, but not a ton. My career in the military was pretty new at the time, but I didn't realize how rare that was to be able to be allowed in the cockpit and especially on takeoff like that. But yeah, the pilots were so nice. The stewardess were so nice. It was like they were so happy to bring us home. The patriotism was at like 500%.
Oh yeah. Something we don't get anymore.
Zach, yeah. You and I were talking about that. I think that was earlier today. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Who, me?
No, yeah. Did I hear you or no? No.
No.
Okay. I was so I said to you earlier, I was like, man, I'm used to asking questions, about hunting and ranching and farming and that kind of shit. And I don't want to ask a stupid question. So when when I talk to veterans, I never ask about things like this. Like all of us want to hear these kind of stories, right? But I told you that story about that buddy of mine at Mississippi State when I was in college. He was a Marine, got out of the Marines, and he was a lot older than us, obviously. And he decided he wanted to go back and be a wildlife biologist. And so he sat in most of my classes with me, and he was telling me how, like, coming out of the Marines and going back into being a civilian, he had to take these classes on how to be a civilian again. And at the time, I thought that was hilarious. And he would tell me some stories, but I would never ask or pry. So I'm curious, Mike, I've heard you tell some of your stories, which are mind-blowing. And Zach, obviously you've told me plenty of stories. Are you comfortable? Is that a personal thing, or is that kind of like a unspoken never ask a veteran, especially guys like you who've been in, active duty during wartime?
Yeah, for me, like I think what you're talking about is like how to relate back to the civilian world. I think it's more challenging. Yeah, I think it depends on the unit you're in too. So if the more elite and I guess disciplined your unit is, the bigger letdown you're going to have when you get out of the military. And most military units, period, are going to have more discipline and more structuralness, than the civilian world. But I was just talking to a Ranger buddy the other day about this, and I'm not trying to be biased because it's my unit, but it's one of the things that I've noticed is that, like, I've been in multiple units. I went to the Special Forces world for a while, worked out at the Special Forces Freefall School, and I never had to deal with the issues in the Ranger Regiment that I had to deal with out there, because I had E7s, like SF dudes, like not showing up to work on at all. And I'd have to go send someone to go get them because they were asleep drunk at their house. Or like I had several other guys from all the different branches, Navy, like the special warfare guys there, the Air Force guys, constant little issues like that. So I was blown away by that. Like just going from the Ranger Regiment to that, because like I said, the Ranger Regiment's the hardest unit to stay into. Why? Because if you drink and act a fool, gone. Yeah. You get a DUI, gone. You drink and get in a fight at a bar and the cops get called, gone. Like, I mean, you show up with alcohol in your breath the next morning. I don't care if you drank 5,000 beers the night before. You can do that as long as you don't have alcohol in your breath in the morning somehow. And you're good to go. But if you do, gone. You know what I mean? Like, you disrespect somebody. Like if a senior NCO comes in and you act like you have the slightest attitude towards that dude, gone. I mean, like it's not tolerated there. So I'm saying all of this to say that a lot of guys like me have a harder time when we get out, because we expect professionalism. We expect the utmost professionalism because that's what we dealt with for so long. And like, luckily I got let down a little bit easy because I went and spent 4 years in the special forces world, working with the white side SF guys, the Green Berets and the SEALs and the PJs and stuff that I hadn't really worked with. And that kind of, I guess, eased me into it because, yeah, I'm blown away. Every day I deal with it. I'm like, how in the heck can people not be on time? How is it that I tell you a uniform, I literally write it in text, and you can't show up in the right uniform? But I deal with that, and it's frustrating. But it's easily overcomable, but, some people struggle with it.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially now, like there seems to be this massive lack of discipline everywhere in getting contractors to show up, and just all throughout life. I would think you would get so pissed off because doing what you did, it was a matter of life or death, right? And for these people, they take it all for granted.
Yeah, it's a challenge to deal with. Having people showing up on time for contractors coming out to fix my house and stuff like that. Getting people that'll actually even do it, and then when they come out, will they even actually do a good job? It is frustrating. But
Grant's doing an internship with me this year, and your supervisor came out, Grant, and did kind of I don't know what he was doing, a waste of time, I guess. But what did he say the biggest complaint was of most of these supervisors?
Kids not showing up at all.
Yeah, kids don't even show up at all. Like I can't even fathom that. Wow. For work. Yeah. I mean, for school, I get that because that's like prison. But for work, I mean, these kids get out of school and they get to go, obviously intern with businesses or whatever. So that's crazy. So, okay. Pardon my ignorance, but the Ranger unit obviously is a massively elite military unit. What sort of things are you called upon to do? Like what are your missions?
The main thing that Rangers as a force do, like the overall force, is forcible entry. So that's the number one task for the Ranger Regiment by the United States of America, is forcible entry. It's like the way I could describe it is it's the United States of America's only skeleton key. It can get into anywhere, anytime, anyway, anyhow. So there's no other unit that can actually do that. And that's because the Ranger Regiment can deploy so fast anywhere in the world and as an entire unit and jump in from the air, land, sea, or air. That's, our motto there that has been around since before the SEALs, by the way. But I just have to throw that out there. But the land, sea, or air thing. So we can infiltrate by land, sea, or anywhere and seize airfields, take infrastructure and seize it so that now we can get a foothold into a country, right? So let's say, for example, some American dignitaries, right? Politicians go overseas and they get hemmed up in, let's just say Germany, just making stuff up, but like they're rolled up in Germany and the German government's holding them hostage or whatever. it would be the Ranger Regiment that would seize a foothold in that country, so that like guys like Delta Force or like maybe SEAL Team 6 guys could come in and do the rescue and rescue those dudes out. And Rangers would play a part in that mission as well. But their main part is to bust in, like come in with a sledgehammer and bust the door wide open and be like, yo, what's up? We're here. Nobody can mess with us. And then they'll send those guys out to do that. So that's one of the main missions, which is the airfield seizure piece is tied into that. The other thing is that the Ranger Regiment is, the moniker says that it's the United States military's premier raid force. So that's one of the things that we do a ton, which a raid is. You think about like the FBI coming in your door, like a SWAT team coming in a door somewhere and going after the bad guys. That's a raid. It's a planned like assault or an attack on a type of like area or a house with a planned withdrawal. And so that's what Rangers do a lot. Like in Afghanistan, Iraq, that's what we did tons of. Doing that, and that's just kicking in the doors, killing bad guys. We can use explosive breaching techniques. So we're all trained in explosives and advanced demolition stuff to blow doors off, or to even blow the entire walls or blow up caches. We have snipers. It's a lot that goes into it. Snipers will climb on roofs so they can overwatch us as we're moving into the buildings. Lots of stuff there, but that's the main bread and butter there. And then we also do a lot of clandestine stuff too, like reconnaissance stuff, like what I did, long range reconnaissance stuff, clandestine reconnaissance stuff, low vis, dressing up like the locals, blending in with them, moving around the town, taking pictures, sneaking in, sneaking out, and like working with the locals and kind of like getting them to come onto our side and help us out. We do in the long range reconnaissance stuff could include, in like one of our mission sets there is to do a military free fall insertion in. So jump from as high as 35,000 feet. And then whether it's high altitude, high opening or altitude, low opening, open fly to the drop zone and then walk 40 miles with tactical recce rucks over any type of terrain on planet Earth and be there within like 2 to 3 days of landing on the ground. So that's one of our basic skill sets right there. Lots of shooting, lots of parachuting. I mean, there's lots of training involved in it. Like we're constantly doing medical training. Like every single guy, like we have medics that are really good at medical stuff. Like some of the best trauma medics in the world are in the Ranger Regiment because they have to deal with a lot of gunshot wounds a lot. But not just the medics. Every single dude in Ranger Battalion is highly, highly trained at medical stuff. I mean, they could. After you've been there for a while and you've gotten some of those courses under your belt, like your average E5 or E6 could literally save your life and do like combat surgery on you in the field if needed. So that's a key thing. Physical fitness is a key thing. Like somebody just sent me a video a while back that I just watched, and it was these mountain fitness guys. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they were training Ranger. They went to the Ranger Regiment to train with the Ranger Regiment. And they were saying that they've trained with all the other special operations units, and they were saying they're the most physically fit, most mentally tough dudes in the military that they've seen. And I mean, that's part of the training that we do because we're always training hard. But that's what the regiment's job is. It's really, to get into anywhere, anytime, any place, and always succeed.
I'm sure you've got a pile of stories, and I've heard some of them. If you had to pick one or two, what would they be? Like if you're sitting there someday talking to your grandkids or somebody asks you to tell, like you're talking about invading Iraq, like can you explain to those of us who are never in that situation, or Grant who plays, what's that game you play all the time?
Call of Duty.
Call of Duty. Can you explain one of those like legitimate stories, like experiences?
Mike, I want to interject real quick. Can you tell them about when you and Rodney Brown were in the vans and got caught at that checkpoint? You brought that dude in the freaking head.
That's a good one.
Thanks, Zach. Nice.
That's a good one.
That is a badass story.
We were actually on like an admin mission. It wasn't even like a tactical mission. We went from the little, like we were at a CIA base because we were working with the CIA then. And then we rolled out to like the big army base because that's where like our commanders and stuff were. So we could go talk to them and just talk about some stuff, get some supplies from like the PX or whatever. And and then roll back. And we ended up getting stuck a little bit late. So we were after the curfew. And like I was saying, we do a lot of low vis stuff, blending in with locals and stuff like that too. So when we do that, we got to act like the locals. And on this day, we messed up a little bit and ended up getting a little late rolling out. And I can't remember why, but we were like, okay, the risk is acceptable. So we ended up rolling back, and we got caught after dark. And then we come to this bridge, and as we're coming up to the bridge, there was the van in front of me, which I believe was the van Rodney was in, and then I was in the second van, and then the third van had the team leader, and I was working I was the only Ranger assigned to SEAL Team 6 at the time, and so I was working, not the only one assigned to SEAL Team 6, but at that outstation. So I was working there with these guys, and the team leader was a SEAL Team 6 guy, and I was the assistant team leader for this team. And we're out there rolling up to this checkpoint. There's Taliban dudes on the roof with or these are actually ANA or AMP, actually like cops or like local low-level military guys. But as we roll up, we're like, hey, we're just cruising through. We're just civilian contractors. Obviously they know we're not Afghans, but at first glance, we might look Afghan. But then after we start talking, the gig's up. So we're like, hey, we're just civilian contractors doing like some non-threatening stuff. Like, oh, we were delivering some books to the school over here or something like that, whatever our cover story is, right? So we roll up and they're like, oh, we're not going to let you go, even if your George Bush calls and says to let you go. We're like, okay. So we're sitting there. One van went across the bridge, and that was Rodney. So we called him to come back. I was about halfway across the bridge, and I started coming back because the third van was the one that got hung. And so as we're waiting there was a dude that came up to my window, and he's literally like smoking a cigarette, leaning on the window of the van that we were in. And it's all blacked out on the inside, so he can't really see that well. And he's trying to reach in and turn the car off, turn the keys off. I'm like, nah, that was one of our SOPs. Like, we're not turning the car off, and we're not getting out of the vehicle. So we were trying to talk our way through, talking it through. The guys in the back, our interpreters are talking to him. Well, I got a dude in front of me that's walking up on the car. And this dude, he was like a newer guy. He was an Afghan dude, but probably like a newer guy because he's amped. This is like his first gunfight about to be, or so he's thinking. And this dude's amped. Like, he's just getting antsy with that gun. You can tell, like, he's getting ready to shoot this thing. And the dude at my window is much more calm, and he speaks English too. So he's like speaking to me. And then he's like, are you Taliban? And I'm like, no, I'm not Taliban. Are you Taliban? And he's like, yes, I Taliban. I'm like, oh, okay. So now we know that Taliban has infiltrated some of these groups, which we'd already known that, but we knew that there were some in this group at this point. So we're trying to talk our way through. Well, it gets to the point where this antsy dude's getting antsy a lot more. So I call it up over the radio. I'm like, hey, we're going to have to shoot our way out of this place pretty quick. This dude's like amped up over here, getting ready to lose his cool. I said, we got to go, or we're going to have to start doing a countdown because this dude's getting ready to just pop off some shots. And so they're like, all right, we're trying. So we start getting on, like the team leader calls it. He's like, all right, 1 minute. If we're not out of here by then, we're shooting our way out of here. It gets down to like 30 seconds, probably even counting down below 30 seconds. And then finally, I just hear, all right, we're good, we're clear, no shots, and then let's roll. And we were clear to roll. So our interpreter had ended up talking us through. He basically showed them one of our military radios, like the green radios. And he was like, hey, this radio right here talks to the night plane, which is like an AC-130 that they're terrified of. So even though we didn't even have an AC-130 for this, because it was just an admin run. So we had no AC-130, but he lied to him. He was like, hey, see this radio? We could talk to the night plane. You might kill us, but it's going to kill all y'all. And they were like, oh, crap, we'll let you go. And they let us on through.
Some of the craziest stories are when shots never fired.
Yeah, I had another one similar to that. I don't know if I've told this one on a podcast. I'll tell it here and see what you guys think. So this other mission, I was running with the AFO team, the CIA dudes, So the CIA dudes would send out an AFO team with like one dude with like a tech device. That's all I really want to say over this, but like a tech device that can find out where other tech devices are. And he was driving out with that, and like they would always need like an extra shooter in case the crap hit the fan. But nobody ever really wanted to roll with him. So I'm like, dude, I'm all about going out anytime I can get out. So I was like, I'll roll with you. I like doing that stuff anyway. I like kind of being out there by myself, you know, like, and not being with like tons of other people. I don't know why. I've always felt comfortable by myself doing stuff, and or like in a smaller group. So I roll out with the CIA dude. We go out in a van. It's got two Afghans driving. So like, well, one Afghan driving, one Afghan in the passenger seat, and then it's got the CIA dude in the middle of the van, like running this technology stuff that he's got and this tech equipment. And then it's me in the back with, you know, just as an extra shooter in case the crap hits the fan. Well, then we get on up, and mind you, a lot of people too don't realize a lot of the CIA dudes that I was working with back then, they're like my age or maybe even a little older now. So like I'm kind of stiff and a little slow and old now. So now I used to look at those dudes. I'm like, what is this old dude gonna do if anything happens? Because I mean, there was literally some really old dudes there, but they were good dudes and they stayed in the fight. But so anyway, we got that guy, me and the extra shooter, and we go up to the target to try to find the target before the raid goes down. Mind you, we've got about 100 Afghan fighters and about 10 CIA dudes and about 10 military dudes around the corner about a mile just staging. So like we rode with them, and then they parked, and then we kept on going to the target. So we were basically doing reconnaissance is essentially what this is, but it was technical reconnaissance. So we're going up there, we find the target. Well, then there's like two dudes at the target building, and they're wearing A&A coats. So like they're supposed to be Afghan National Army, but they come up and our Afghans are talking to them, and they were like, hey, we're just driving around looking for IEDs, basically. That's what they told them, that we were just sweeping roads for IEDs and that we were IED clearing team or whatever. And these guys were like, oh, yeah, well, you're staying here. We're not going to let you through. And they were like, we're calling the Taliban. So they're like, okay, cool. So they're calling the Taliban. So we call it back up. We're like, hey, we're out here by ourselves. These dudes aren't letting us through. They're saying they're going to call the Taliban on us. Don't know how serious this is, but we just want to give you guys the heads up. So now the assault force with all those dudes is starting to roll our way. They're like slow rolling our way. And we're sitting there, we're trying to talk our way out. Well, then next thing you know, like, mind you, I'm in a van facing to the rear of the van. It had like a rear jump seat built into it. So I'm like looking over my shoulder, trying to turn around and see what's going on up front. And I'm looking and I see like 20 to 30 dudes running down this alley from like a couple hundred meters away, like running, and like dudes got like RPGs, PKMs, machine guns, all kinds of stuff. Run like dudes ready to fight, coming running at us. And I'm like, all right. So I told the CIA dude, like I totally like envisioned this in my head. I was like, I'm about to get like the Medal of Honor on this one. Because I was like, I'm about to duke it out. And like, this is the only way this is going to go. So like, I just started taking charge of the situation. I'm like, hey, all right, if we don't see the assault force in the next couple seconds, by the time these dudes get to this point, I'm hopping out the back of the van. There was like a wall right next to me. I was like, I'm hopping out the van. I'm going to get up next to the wall, use the wall for cover, and I'm going to start smoking dudes. I said, you guys hit the van, get in this van and slam it in reverse, haul butt all the way out to the highway, and then go 1,000 meters back towards the strike force, and I'll meet you guys there. That was my plan. And so we had talked about it a little bit like this back and forth, and the CIA dude was like, okay, but let's hold for just a second. I'm like, all right, holding. I'm like, all right, I'm getting ready to go. And about that time, the assault force with all of our American buddies and the Indige come rolling around the corner, gun truck after gun truck after gun truck. And dude, those bad guys scattered like cockroaches. And that's how it ended. Seriously, like no shot fired. Another one of those events where no shot was fired. but it was very close to being a really bad gunfight where like I would have been the only person shooting 40 something dudes and probably wouldn't have made it out of there. Who knows?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Zach, what do you have?
I don't got nothing like that. Honestly, the most scared time that I ever was when we were on the invasion after the MOAS went through. Mike, you remember the MOAS?
What was the MOAS?
The mother of all sandstorms?
Oh, okay.
It shut down the whole freaking invasion there, like the first week of the damn invasion.
Oh, yeah, I do vaguely remember that. Man, I forgot all about that.
Oh, yeah, there was a Marine tank that freaking ran in the Euphrates, and like I think the whole tank crew drowned. Like they didn't even know where they were at, and ran right to the freaking Euphrates.
It's crazy how I forgot all about that, man.
Dude, that was a long time ago, like a really long time ago. But we were up on the bridge over the Euphrates, and they had all this intel. Like there's 1,000 Iraqis leaving Nasiriyah, and they're coming right your way, and you got to dig in for the night. Da 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 da, whatever. It was shitty intel. And so we're sitting up there on the bridge, and we had 2 gun trucks on the bridge, and they're like, "You guys are the furthest north unit right now. You know, there's no one ahead of you." We're like, "Okay, well, that's cool." So we're sitting up there, we're shooting the bull on the bridge and whatnot, and we see these lights coming. And everybody, I was a little bit crazy, not stupid, just a little bit off the wall, kind of like I am now. And these lights keep coming towards us, and they're like, "Dude, you're gonna have to go out there and stop them." I was like, "I'm not going out." They're like, "Yeah, you got to go." I was like, "No, I'm not going." I was like, "Pat, you go." He's like, "Dude, I'm not going. I'm on the 50." I was like, "Well, I'm not going." We went back and forth, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'll go. I'll just go." They come up over the bridge, and I'm kneeling down in the center of the road with my rifle pinned, like right dead center of the driver. I was like, "I'm gonna freaking light this dude up." Well, turns out it's a bunch of Humvees. It was actually a Marine Transportation Support Group. It was TSG-3. And they pull up. I was like, "Dude, I almost shot you." They're like, "Dude, we almost fucking shot you. We thought you were an Indige." I was like, "No, I'm an American." And they're obviously, and they're like, "Yeah, we almost shot you." I was like, "Dude, I had my rifle trained on you. Like we were about to go." And come to find out, they're like, "Yeah, we didn't hear any of this intel." And then their analyst called back and was like, "Yeah, you need to dig in with them for the night because it's about to get hairy up there. All these Iraqis are leaving Nasiriyah and they're coming your way." So we dug in for the night, getting ready to fight. We had an AC. This is the only time I ever had an AC-130 on station, and you heard that thing freaking humming overhead all night long. Nothing ever happened. Yeah. That was it.
A little dull roar.
Yeah, it was just a dull rumble all night long. Black as freaking the ace of spades. I mean, it was so black out there in that southeastern or southwestern desert. Like there was no starlight. Starlight scopes. Mike, you remember that? Starlight scopes would hardly even work.
Yeah.
It was so freaking dark out there.
Yeah, especially when the moon's not out, it's dark, dark, dark.
Oh, it's so dark. And yeah, nothing happened. It was just like that was bad intel. Whatever. Keep moving north. So then we went up to the Saddam Canal because they were cutting off Nasiriyah, and then they were trying to build maybe Johnsons across the Saddam to get to the other side and bypass MSR Michigan there through Nasiriyah. So we went up and started building the Maybe Johnson Bridge through the Saddam Canal.
All right, I have a question for you guys. So obviously, I didn't serve my country. I'm just curious when you, and I don't know, this is at all levels, I guess. Are there ever guys who you look at where you're like, I don't trust that guy, or I'm not comfortable with that guy? Like in life, for me, I'm extremely loyal. So I heard Mike say that he was always more comfortable by himself or in a small group. And I picked up on that because I totally agree with that. So
Mike, you remember our conversation about, the old saying, there's no such thing as a coward out here. And then you actually find out who the cowards are.
Yeah, that's where the cowards get revealed at, is in combat. And,
but even at your level though, Mike, haven't they been weeded out by that point at the Ranger level?
Yeah, it's hard that I'm really scouring down to think, but there's I never had any Rangers that I worked with that I just wouldn't go out on a mission with, that I didn't trust. For the most part, all the team, like every platoon that I was in, man, I loved every single dude in the platoon. There may be dudes that I didn't necessarily agree with on everything. Sometimes we'd butt heads on things, but I knew when the gunfight happened, that dude's got my back and I got his. And I guess it's because for us, like during the GWAT, we were constantly being tested. We were getting gunfight after gunfight after gunfight after gunfight all the time. So it didn't take long to see like who was there and who was not. Like if they were cowards, they were going to be gone by now.
Yeah, you knew it.
So we never really had any like that. I did bump into some guys from some other units that like some of the tier 1 units that I worked with that were trash, and I would never want to go on a mission with them. But and that was not in the Ranger Regiment. That was other guys, and I don't really want to throw people under the bus. But I've been on a handful of missions with tier 1 dudes. When I was in the reconnaissance company, the regiment's tier 1 unit, working with other tier 1 dudes that I was like, this dude's a liability to the mission because they were so out of shape. And then a lot of times their attitude, they just had some of these dudes had a bad attitude. It wasn't very often you'd see that, but there was times when I saw that from some of the other tier 1 units.
Yeah, I often wonder that because, Zach, you and I have talked about that just in life. Like in life and business, I get frustrated when I can't trust certain people, and I can only imagine when your life's on the line and you're fighting with guys like that. It's like, you've got to be able to, like, for instance, I was talking to Zach one time, and that may have been partly today, Zach, I don't know, or multiple times. Like war to me, and again, I didn't serve my country. I'm a constitutional originalist. I believe it's black and white. The Constitution was written. There's no question. I feel like a lot of the wars that we're fighting, I don't think our men and women should be anywhere near them, especially some of this, all of these. And Ukraine's a joke. I mean, it's all a racket. It's all making people money. And it just pisses me off. Like, I remember hunting with one of my favorite outfitters in Montana, Eric Albus, Eric. And I said to him, and he's just not an older, but he's an experienced guy, and I respect him a lot. I said, do you have any regrets in life? And this is the kind of thing you do when you're driving around the Peace River or Milk River, whatever, and, you're hunting for a week. And he said, I have one regret, and it's not serving my country. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I could see where that would come from. And then Grant has always been kind of like Mike said, like Grant, when he was younger, we had to go find him on the farm because he would take like his airsoft or his some of the other guns you always had, Grant. Oh, you're muted. I muted his ass. That's what you get.
Like a 22 or a pellet rifle.
Yeah, like he would just disappear and go build forts with pallets and shit like that. And I remember my wife and I, especially my wife, she's like, I'm going to be so disappointed if he wants to go into the military, not because she doesn't love her country, but because she's fearful of assholes like the bureaucrats that we have leading the country and sending us into wars so that they can get kickbacks. And it just seems like their kids always somehow, dodge the draft, etc. But I guess it makes me think a lot about, should I have fought for my country? And, Grant's a senior, right? Zach, we were talking about this today. I was like, this would be a good podcast for Grant to sit in on because he doesn't know what he wants to do. And he would be a damn good warrior for sure, but I don't want him doing that just because of the nonsense that this country's doing right now.
Dude, I don't think any of our parents really wanted us to do what we did. Like my dad was like, when I joined MEPS after 9/11, it was like September 14th, right after 9/11. My dad's like, I mean, you're lost, but it's a good thing for you to do. He's like, I support your decision. My mom came out cussing the recruiter out, like, oh my God, he's not gonna do this, So it was like kind of different ends of the spectrum. But I mean, my dad at the same time, my stepmom would always tell us, I was in Iraq and my brother-in-law was on a SEAL team in Afghanistan. And like my dad would talk to nobody for the year that both of us were gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't want us there, but he was proud of what we were doing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I'll say you like opening up this can of worms in this conversation. Like you're about to put me on a soapbox for that one, man. Because I'm telling you, I fought like 22 years, 18 combat deployments for my country. I volunteered for extra deployments. I missed some because of being in training while I was going through the pipeline for RRC, but other than that, I still did every deployment I was obligated to do, and then ask for extra ones, especially when I got to the reconnaissance company. So, a lot of people, they could call me unpatriotic or whatever they want to call me, but it doesn't bother me one bit because I've done more than my fair share.
Yeah.
But what I learned while doing more than my fair share is that it's a rich man's trick, man. Like there's actually a documentary that talks about it's called A Rich Man's Trick. And that's where I got that term from, but that's what it is. And I didn't really put all of this together until after I saw everything I saw in my career. And then I retired, and I'm going to explain a lot of this stuff. I'll point to these data points, but I saw all these different things throughout my career. Then I retired, and then I realized how little the military cares about me. Then we pulled out of Afghanistan. I started rescuing dudes out of Afghanistan, started tracking that, getting in the news media about it, started seeing all this corruption with our government. And long story short, all our wars are completely fake and contrived. And it's completely to make rich men richer. And it's not just like good Americans that have a good business and are kind of wealthy. No, you ain't even in on the scheme until you're way up there. I'm talking like the Elon Musk type people, like up there. Those are the people. I'm not saying him, but there are people. A lot of these big corporations, especially the military industrial complex, make immense amounts of money off of this stuff. For example, Ukraine. We sent $150 billion worth of equipment to Ukraine. Last I tracked. Why, the taxpayers are like, why are we giving away all of our equipment? It costs so much money. The politicians are saying, give it away. We'll make the taxpayer buy more, and we'll get bribes off of passing these bills. Mm-hmm. So the politicians don't care about giving our equipment away because they know they're going to pass a law that allows Lockheed Martin to make 10 more of them. And meanwhile, they're going to get $5 million in their pocket for passing that bill. I've been in meetings and political meetings where these bribes happen. These bribes happen. There are lobbyists in there bribing our politicians. All legal decisions and all political decisions in the United States government are made on bribes, not on legit policy. So, for example, in Afghanistan, whenever we had safe houses that we would live in Afghanistan. One of the safe houses that we rented was $45,000 US a month. And I was like, how is, like I say, a 3,000 square foot house in Kabul, Afghanistan, made out of pretty decent construction, not like a mud hut, but still like running water and bathrooms and all. And we're like, how is that $45,000 a month, US dollars a month? And so I asked the dudes that we were talking to rent them out, and they were like, dude, you know who owns all the real estate in Kabul, Afghanistan? Like, no, they showed us like it was all the American politicians, British politicians, Canadian politicians, French, German, UK, Australian, all of the world leaders owned all the real estate there in Kabul, Afghanistan. And they bought it at a great investment before 9/11. So, what does that tell you?
Yeah, right.
And then, and people think this is a conspiracy theory. But I saw recently Tucker Carlson released something saying that the CIA admitting to dropping the World Trade Centers. Well, I've actually met a guy that was involved with that works. Yeah, I literally met this guy, and he was like, yeah, just like when we dropped the World Trade Centers. I'm like, are you serious, dude? So like all of these little data points, and there's thousands and thousands more. Like I caught black market arms dealing rings in Kabul, Afghanistan, that were funded by the United States government. They were literally giving equipment to the enemy. We were funding the Taliban by billions of dollars a year through what I thought was malpractice or mismanagement back when I was in the military. But now seeing everything in the big picture, I know that it wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's just standard operating procedure at that point. And that's what I mean by it just pisses me off that and obviously you've seen a hell of a lot more than me, but my wife and I were talking about, I told her about this podcast today. I'm like, this is pretty cool. It's different. We're going to do something for Memorial Day for the veterans. And this is exactly what she brought. Somehow we just got, like you said, just kind of each on our own soapbox. And she was like, like Zelensky, like this freaking guy is, they fly him to LA to some, I forget the name of the awards banquet where these big, to-do freaks in Southern California, et cetera, are giving the guy like accolades. I'm like, you kidding me? This is such a dog and pony show. And that's what I'm saying. If I were to find out that one of my kids wanted to serve, it's not defending America or our country that and I'm extremely patriotic and so appreciative of guys like you and girls. But it makes me freaking sick because the older I get, the more I realize that it's not just America, U.S., it's all countries. All countries throughout history have utilized, the bureaucrats have utilized wars and the monetary system, the financial system, to basically put money in their own pockets. I mean, how did these bureaucrats go to Washington and maybe make $200,000 a year, if that, but then come out multi-millionaires? How do they do that?
Yeah, I wish I could figure that out. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like I told somebody the other day, I'm like, most of these politicians make about the same amount of money that I make, and I can barely get by.
Exactly.
Like, but it's because them son of a guns are stacking away millions in bribes. And, these bribes are $100,000 here, $150,000, $200,000, $500,000 here, $1 million there. But over the course, I mean, they get bribes, and some of them are probably a lot smaller bribes than that too, depending on what the bill is they're pushing. But I've dealt with all these politicians. I've met half the House of Representatives, probably half the Senate. I've met at least over half the governors from the United States at events that I've spoken at, political events. And there's some of them are some really nice people, but I think a lot of them are actually deceived by the system as well, at least initially. But then after you get there, it's just impossible not to be corrupted.
Yeah, you cannot drain that swamp. Good luck.
We had a politician around here that was a local farmer and so on and so forth. And he just won his he got out of Congress for a while and just got elected or won his primary to go back in. But when and he's a Republican, so this is neither side of the fence. When he went into Congress the first time, he had a net worth of negative $89,000, which is all public information. When he came out after that first 4 years, he was like to the positive, like 2.4 million, something like that. So you tell me what's going on over there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
How does some local farmer do that?
And so, speaking of your question, though, about your son, I wouldn't condone him to go into the military. I have guys that reach out to me by all the time, constantly hitting me up on email or Instagram or something like that. They hit me up because they've seen the podcast. They're like, hey, what do you think I should do? What military branch should I go into? I'm honest with these guys, man. I'm like, just knowing what I know, I do believe that the military is good for some things, right? It's a good career path. It does set you up for discipline and it makes you tough, right? It's
good character builder.
Yeah, good character builder. It'll make you tough, especially being in any of the special operations units. I don't even care, even the lowest ones. You're still going to be pretty tough to get in there. But then you got to just be aware that the wars that you're fighting are definitely, I know young boys, like your son's probably just like me when I was your age. I just want to kill somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I want to kill a bad guy. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to be like this superhero and you don't care who it is. Just tell me he's bad and I'll go shoot him, but looking back on it, we have to be more cautious than that. because some of these guys that we killed over there, who knows? Like it's the same. I could chalk it up the same thing as like if the FBI came to raid my house right now, them son of a guns gonna take some casualties, but I'm gonna eventually die probably because just one dude ain't taking down the whole FBI SWAT team. I don't know, I might could, but like it would be that's what happened in Afghanistan. Some of these guys were just defending their houses like I would defend mine if somebody come to raid it. You know what I mean? Because the intel, like you said, the intel is not always that great, and we try to like make ourselves feel better by thinking that it's good, but it's not as good as they tell us it is. You know.
That's 100%. That's the oxymoron. Military intelligence. Come on now, Mike. You know that.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Like I worked on the human side of it. Human intelligence, gathering intelligence from like sources and like Indige and stuff like that. This stuff's so hard to count on, man. I mean, it is like, how do you tell? Like, I'm pretty good at telling if somebody's lying to me. That was some of the stuff that we went through to learn how to like read different tells when people are lying and stuff. And I'm pretty good at it, but still, I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody's a human lie detector. This dude could be lying to me, and then I send troops out, and it's an ambush. Like you never can tell. But ultimately, the military does give you a good skill set. It does build vital skills that can, lend to a guy who wants to do outdoorsy type stuff to make him bigger money after he gets out. But it's just something you have to be aware of. The wars are BS, that's for sure. I mean, like Ukraine, like you were talking about Ukraine. Let me get on that for a second. A buddy of mine, an SF dude, who went over there to audit the equipment that we gave to Ukraine. He said, this ties to Afghanistan too, with the pullout in Afghanistan. He said 98% of the equipment that we gave to Ukraine was sold to Russia. Prime example, they ain't got no war going on over there. They're not at war with Russia, but they sold it to Russia, China, Syria, Iran, and the Mexican drug cartel. Jeez. So where did all this stuff go? Well, Russia, China, Syria, and Iran are all backing Hezbollah and Hamas. So the United States is covertly, this is how covert operations work through the CIA on the bigger scale. That's how they covertly fund wars. And so we are covertly funding all these attacks on Israel right now, which, I mean, I could care less, but I just don't want my buddies dying fighting against the enemy that we're funding. You know what I mean? But it happened like all that stuff in Afghanistan. Like in Afghanistan, we left $84 billion worth of equipment over there. It was sold to Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran, and other countries. So a lot of that's funneled in to be backing Hezbollah and Hamas fighting against Israel. And then meanwhile, the United States government's been flying 100 Taliban a week on U.S. State Department funded aircraft to the United States. I think they stopped that now, last I heard. But this went on for about 1.5 to 2 years. We were flying 100 Taliban a week on U.S. State Department aircraft. Meanwhile, we're giving $45 million a week to the Taliban as well. Like I spoke about some of this stuff in Newsmax back in the day, like years ago. And all of our Afghan special ops guys, the guys that I fought for, that I fought with, those dudes helped us get out all the American citizens. They're still helping us over there when we need help. And our government is giving all this money to the Taliban and flying Taliban out, but they left our dudes there. Straight left. Yep. They literally blocked us from getting them out. There were times where I could have gotten these dudes out, and our government purposefully blocked us.
That's fucked. Grant's looking at me right now with his eyebrows up. But imagine hearing this shit at 17. I mean, that's part of the thing we talk about all the time. Is it the ignorance?
They don't tell me that in school.
No, you're exactly right. They don't teach you that shit in school, and they'll never teach you that in school or admit that. But like we were driving down Main Street, and I was like, "Look at that! There's somebody had a Ukrainian flag flying in the yard." And the first thing Grant said was, "Where's the American flag? Are you kidding me? You're going to fly a Ukrainian flag and no American flag?" And it's just the ignorant, like, you're talking about conspiracy theory. I mean, we all know what the definition of a conspiracy theorist is. Somebody who gets it before everyone else does. And that's exactly what's going on. And it pisses me off that people don't get it. They still think that Ukraine they could never win that war. Am I right? That's a joke.
They could never win that war, and they were never really at war. Yeah. So they were committing genocide on ethnic Russians in the Donbass region for the last 14 years. Funded by the United States, by the way. Like, we were literally committing, like, the United States was funding genocide of human beings, children involved. And then, mind you, this is like the Bidens and all those people you've seen rolled up in this stuff, like I can't remember, Nancy Pelosi and some of those other ones that came out about it. Yeah. They were doing that. And I don't know why the hate for Russians, but Russia's never done anything wrong to me. But Russia came and said, hey, you stop doing this or we're going to come in and free these people. They've been warning it for 14 years. And they finally, not only that, we were going to put weapons and point them. It's like Mexico putting a bunch of nuclear missiles on the border of the United States by Texas and pointing them at us. And we're like, hey, get them out of here. And then they put more up there. That's what we did to Russia all along its border. We're pointing missiles at it from all these countries. And we were going to do that in Ukraine. And Russia's like, no, just stop. Yeah. We're not even a threat to you guys. Come on,
leave us alone.
So that's the thing. And this is where I'm at in the spectrum of things. If the United States government tells me Russia's bad, I'm going to assume they're good.
Yep.
Because I know if the United States says they're bad, it's probably the opposite of that.
Exactly. We were in Florida.
China.
We were in Florida.
I was just going to say, we watched Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson.
No, I thought it was cool because Grant. So we were in Florida hanging out by the river, and Tucker interviewed Putin. And Grant's like, shut up, guy. We're sitting by a fire. He's like, shut up, guys. I want to watch this. And it was like, what? 3 hours? How long was that?
It was long.
Did you guys watch that? His interview with
Putin? I watched some of it, yeah.
It was a lot of translated Russian.
Yeah, and Grant was fascinated by it. And we listened to the whole thing, and all of us were like, well, shit. What he's saying makes sense. Like this, I think at first, Tucker kind of got pissed off and was like, all right, I'm not going to let him bully me. But Putin was like, just shut up and let me tell you the history so you understand what the hell's going on. And it was like...
He went deep in the history, too,
yes.
dude.
Which maybe he needed to, because it kind of gave...
I'm a Hungarian, and I was shocked when he said that there was men in black suits in northern Ukraine sitting on the porches, and he said, Putin asked, well, who are those guys, in these, old black suits? Well, they're Hungarians. And, I come from a very deep root Hungarian heritage, and I had no clue that Hungary was that far down in northern Ukraine, and that was actually Hungarian territory. And then Putin said all that, and I was like, damn, that makes sense, because they were speaking Hungarian, and Putin couldn't translate it. And he's like, what are they speaking? What are they talking about? Well, that's Hungarian. They're talking Hungarian. And I was like, damn, yeah. So northern Ukraine belongs to Hungary, and southern Ukraine belongs to Russia. And then Tucker Carlson asked him, okay, if you take Ukraine, would you give northern Ukraine back to Hungary? He never said definitively yes or no, but he's like, it's their ground, so they should have it back. Yeah. Kind of told me, that belongs to Hungary.
Grant, did your history teacher play that for you guys? No. Imagine that.
Mike, I think I texted you last week. Remember how pissed off I was about what my daughter's 7th grade teacher said about the fucking Taliban?
Oh yeah.
Dude, I was fuming that showed a bunch of slides about Taliban and the Taliban leaders, and the 7th grade teacher said, history teacher, mind you, said that the Taliban were great leaders. And I about lost my shit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Fuck that.
What did you just... You were showing me something the other day, weren't you? I wanted... Yeah, this is...
Talking about school?
Yeah, you were showing me something. I was kind of busy and half ignoring you, but it was something along those lines. It's the indoctrination of American students, for sure. It's a joke.
It's crazy when you dig into it. I started, putting a lot of this stuff together after I retired. I noticed a lot of the things that I saw in my military career with the nonprofit stuff and the rescuing people. I started seeing all this corruption, and I was like, my God, have I been stupid to have trusted my government all these years? And then, then after that, people have hit me with occasional YouTube videos. People will send me on like documentaries of this, that, and the other, and I watch it, and I'm like, God, I watch it, and I'm like, dude, yeah, our government is so corrupt, man, and it's the education system too. They've literally indoctrinated us to be, to hate these people and to like these people and to want to go to war and to all this stuff. And not only that, they've set us into a system where we got to work like slaves just to get by. So we don't have time to actually dig into things and research it for ourselves.
That's what it was. They were trying to tell me that Americans were, whatever you say, racist to Middle Easterns after 9/11.
That's what
they had me read a short story on how we were racist to Middle Easterns
after 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I'm an equal opportunity racist. I hate everybody just the same.
No, we were talking about that earlier.
What color you are.
I was going to introduce you, Zach, as the guy who likes no one and hates everyone.
So my wife is like, you don't like anybody. I'm like, no, like I have a very small group of people that I like, and my people are my people, and I'm very loyal to my people. Outside of that, I don't like people.
I used to be like a big people person, man. I liked all people, and I can get along with all people. But you're right, though, Zach. The older that I get, the less I actually care to really be around a lot of people. I can tolerate all people, but yeah, spending any time with somebody, there's only a limited number of people that I'm good with that now.
So what?
Yeah, exactly. That's the same here.
I'm just curious because like all this stuff that Mike's talking about and we're kind of throwing around, what percentage of Americans right now do you think consider that? My wife gets so triggered, extremely far right. She's extremely, how about it, Grant? We keep begging her to come on the podcast because she needs to be on Fox News. She's like Candace Owens. And like
she knows her shit too.
Yeah, and a lot of common sense, and this stuff pisses her off, but she won't come on the podcast. But I guess what percentage of Americans? I've been told by people that I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I'm like, listen, if you think I'm just making this shit up, let's sit down and, like Mike just did. Mike laid out the whole. He used his past in the military. As he got older, he starts to notice things. He's got friends and associates who are involved in, over in Ukraine and doing inventory on everything we're sending them, et cetera. It's like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. But I just feel like most Americans are so clueless. And maybe this is why people like us get so pissed off at so many people. I don't know. I'm just curious. Like, I feel like I'm in the minority when it comes to just educate yourself. And how many people actually sat there and listened to that entire podcast or show, that interview that
of Putin?
Of Putin. Like that to me, that was freaking mind blowing and should have been played in every history class in America. That's
historical. That right there alone.
Yes.
I think there's a lot more, and I don't care what race group or ethnic group you're targeting or talking about. But I think you would be shocked at the amount of black people, white people, Mexicans, on and on and on, that actually kind of believe the way that we believe. The media just tries to populate it as we're the minority, whereas I think we're the vast majority in the way we think. Because, I talk to a lot of different, I get truck drivers and everything into our shop and so forth that literally black, white, indifferent, it doesn't matter. They all believe the same way that we believe. They believe in God. They want to serve God. They want to do their job and just live life without all the nonsense. And they literally believe the same way that we believe. It doesn't matter race, religion, nothing else. And I think it is the vast majority. And in the media just skews that number in their favor.
I think that's a solid point. Yeah.
Well, their worst nightmare is that we all agree with each other.
Oh, they could never do that.
No.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Zach, too, because I talk to a lot of people, too, and I used to be kind of, careful, like who I would talk to about a lot of the so-called conspiracy theory stuff that I know for a fact is a fact now. It's not a conspiracy theory. I used to be careful who I talked to about that, but now I'm more open about it. And I found out everybody I talk to is in agreement. They're like, yeah, there's something up. Our country's, going to crap. You know what I mean? Our politicians are corrupt. A lot of people are aware of that. I don't think a lot of people are aware of the full depth of it because it goes a lot deeper than what we've talked about on here. But I don't think they're aware of the full depth of it. But I do agree with you. I think a lot of people are coming around.
I mean, I can
for
prove
sure.
that.
Absolutely.
I mean, after the State of the Union, working at the gun shop, our AR rack cleared off within a day. I'm not kidding. I'm talking 10 to 16 ARs. I think were gone in a day.
Joe Biden,
See, I don't
the
even watch
best gun
the news
salesman in
anymore.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Mike,
even watch the news anymore.
We're getting older, but we're still like you're very physically fit. I'm a fat farmer, so I'm not fat, but
A short, fat farmer.
I'm a short fat farmer. Yeah. But don't you think that if something were to pop off, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but there is a certain group of people that the United States government knows they don't want to piss off, and there's places they know that they will never be able to go.
Yeah, I do believe that's the case. They got to be smarter than what we think they are. You know what I mean? Like they can't be that dumb. Thinking they're going to come roll us all up at some point in time.
I mean, after knowing all the information that people put in when they go to buy a gun, their only problem is that they know everything. They know everything you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a good experience, I think, as a 17-year-old working in a gun shop. And obviously the subgroup of people who walk into a gun shop, I mean, you're not going to get... Every time I walk into the gun shop Grant works at, I'm like, hey, do you guys have any Joe Biden signs? and obviously it's a joke, but, I mean, you're getting guys in there, like he said. COVID was the same way. How about gun sales during COVID? I mean, it was insane. You couldn't even get guns and ammo.
I mean, ammo is just now coming up.
Yeah, 4 years later.
You're just now being able to get some of the most common rounds that you would think you should be able to get anywhere.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I hope the price will come back down eventually, too. But it seems like everything, the price goes up and it just sticks there.
I mean, the prices on 5.56 right now are the only... That's why I got an AR in 5.56, because everything else, your hunting calibers... I mean, we have some hunting calibers that are $70 a box. And that's
308s are close to what, $1 a round?
Everything's almost $1 a round.
Oh, yeah, or more. Yeah, like 7mm
$1
Remington
a round
Magnum.
is normal now.
Yeah. Like you're saying, 7mm Remington Magnum for a box of 20 of those. Yeah, it's around 65, 70 bucks.
Some of our like 350 Legend, that's like $75 a box, I think.
Now, Grant, did you get your AR? Is it chambered 5.56 and 223?
Yeah.
Okay.
5.56 is the cheaper of the two right now.
Yeah, and if you can fire 5.56, you can fire 223.
Yeah, it's the same.
And I couldn't remember how it went.
It's the
if you
same
got one
diameter
chambered
case.
223, you can't fire 5.56. But if you get it in 5.56, you can fire 223.
Yeah, right.
That's because
it's like the 38
5.56 has a
special.
higher. Yeah, it's like that because 5.56 has a hotter chamber capacity, like as far as like the pressures from what I've heard.
From the gases.
It's loaded to a higher pressure than 223.
Yeah, because like the AR I got, the gas block can hold more pressure from the 5.56, which means it also holds the pressure from the 223.
For the 223, yep.
But not vice versa.
Yeah, I knew it was one way or the other. I just couldn't remember which way it was.
Yep.
Well, that's good stuff. I'm glad we got into the conspiracy theory, but fact stuff.
Yeah, that kind of went off track a little bit. But
no, that was actually one of my only major questions, because when, like I've said it in the past on my podcast in passing, and then after, my wife is always like, I could never do a podcast because everything I say, I would later just sit there and go, oh crap, did I say the wrong thing, right? And it's too late once it's aired. And in the past, I've said things like, these useless wars or, something like that. And then I think about it. I'm like, man, I hope our veterans don't hear that and think that I'm kind of writing off their missions and what that's not what I mean. What I mean is it pisses me off to put guys like you two in harm's way for this bullshit racket of making, of kicking back 10% for the big guy, right? Like that. And perhaps the worst part of it all is that I feel like most people don't even get it. Like they don't. The people in town, Grant, flying the Ukraine flag. Like, I just want to stop and slap them with it. Like, I mean, if you're from Ukraine, that's great. Be proud, but go fight then. Because, it's you're sitting here in my country, probably paying a hell of a lot less in taxes than I am, which is bullshit. And you're not even flying my flag, and that offends the hell out of me.
Yeah. Well, and Mike, I don't know about you, but me personally, like I never thought about fighting for my country when we were actually overseas. Like that never crossed my mind. It was just about the guy to the right, the guy to the left. You had a mission, you had a task, you went and accomplished that task, tried to make it to where no one got hurt. Sometimes that was out of everybody's control. Things, happen. But like, it wasn't like I was fighting for the United States when we were there. I was just kind of doing our thing. Like it was almost selfish to a point, right? We just thirsty for a little bit of action, thirsty for something more. It was never about, fighting for my flag or my country or something like that. Mm-hmm. Initially, when we went in, maybe, yes, it was. But as things progressed and as, GWAT went down and so forth, like it wasn't really about the country. It was just like, we have a mission and we're going to go accomplish this mission, day by day, task by task. And I just want to make sure that my buddies get home alive. Whether I die doesn't really matter. But as long as they get home, like that's all that really matters.
Yeah. No, that's definitely it, man. You end up being over there and you're just like, like you don't even want to miss a mission because you're like, if I miss this mission, what happens if somebody else dies? Like, would they have died if I'd have been there? Like it's one of those things. Yeah. I agree with you. Like I wanted to fight for my country. Like that's what we say,
yep.
For like God and country or whatever. But then, when it really boils down to it, you're fighting with those dudes that are next to you on your left and your right, man. Like those dudes have become your brothers, like some of those dudes that I fought with are some of the closest buddies I still have, and I love those dudes and I'd do anything for them because of the loyalty and the bond that we built there. And so of course you want to fight to defend their lives too.
Yeah. It's those guys are closer than family. Like where else do you eat, sleep, shit, piss? It doesn't even matter. Like these dudes know the most intimate things about you that probably no one else does.
Yeah, I mean, you're sleeping, and a lot of times you're sleeping in the same room as them, watching movies with them, getting up, you're going to the chow hall to eat dinner with them, you're coming back watching more movies, and then go to sleep, and then you wake up, you're going to the gym with these guys, then you're going to get breakfast, and then you're going to like mission briefs to get briefed for the mission. Then you're going on the mission with them. Then you come back and go to the post mission workout. Like for us, like that's the way we work out before a mission. And then if we had a mission, we'd sometimes come back and work out after the mission too, because we'd still be kind of amped up.
Yeah, those guys are the most important thing in your life at that time. Like they'd read you their letters from home.
Yeah,
just stupid Zach, things like that.
You told me that once before, and that helped put it into perspective for me because I told you, like Colombia, all this bullshit nonsense going on at Colombia, they should just drop a bomb. I mean, the same thing went on during Vietnam, right? They're having all this nonsense, and during Vietnam, they brought Marxist professors over here to teach those students at Columbia University how to be Marxists. And when you look at it, it looks just like it did during Vietnam. And like I remember saying to you, Zach, one time, like, did you ever think when you were fighting, like man, I'm really pissed off right now that you've got these, whatever, call them whatever you want, these hippies or these entitled kids back in America who are sitting around in their pajamas looking at their iPhones, and here I am, hungry, tired, and potentially about to die for them,
and they don't like no other.
And you immediately said no. All I was ever thinking about was how can me and my group of guys get the hell out of here, get this mission done, and nobody get hurt. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like I could fight for a group of guys who I'm in battle with, but I cannot fight for most of what war is about. Speaking to the point that Mike just kind of went through.
No, that was the biggest thing. I mean, honestly, it was all about the guys that were around you. Like you love them, even if you didn't love them, even if you didn't like them, they were still a part of your group. They were still a part of you, and you never wished ill or anything like that on them. So, even if they weren't on your top 10 list, you still don't want to let anything happen to them. Like when you'll live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Yeah. So you do everything you can to make sure that they're okay, because they're your guys. Like whether you like them or not, they're still your guys.
Yep.
It's good stuff.
No, that's the way it is. And that's one of the things, and Zach and I have talked about this a lot. This is like shifting gears here a little bit. But that's one of the things that drove me to like the Bible. You know what I mean? Like I grew up Christian and all that kind of stuff, but then went to church my whole life. But, religion never really stuck to me. Like I went through it. I'm like, whatever, but then went in the military, kind of drifted away from that stuff for a bit. And then whenever I retired from the military and I've been home and I've been seeing and putting a lot of these pieces from all these life experiences together, like the rental houses in Kabul, the black market arms dealing rings where our government was basically just handing weapons and billions of dollars to the enemy. And like, I was like, why is this happening? Like, there's got to be some truth to this. And then I started digging, like one of the things, I don't know, I guess I just started digging into the Bible. I'm like, maybe the Bible's got some truth in it. And one of the things that I found out there is when I study it a lot now. You can ask Zach about it. We talked about it a ton. But you think we've been deceived by our government? You think we've been deceived by our education system? Just wait till you find out how deceived you've been by what church teaches.
Yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely satanic. It literally is. And I have Bible studies galore that I can show this and lay it out. Like some of them takes an hour and a half to get through enough scripture. But dude, like most of what's taught in churches is nothing to do with the Bible. Yes, they may use a scripture here and there. I could take any scriptures. I could take a handful of scriptures out of the Bible and twist them into whatever doctrine I want. That's the problem. But you can't do that because the Bible interprets itself. That's what there's scripture that says that the Bible interprets itself, and you have to study precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. That's another scripture. And when you do, and when you put it in its full context, from the very front of the Bible all the way to the back of the Bible, in the context of the chapter, in the context of the book, in the context of the entire Bible itself, that's when you get to the purity of doctrine. And when you dig that deep, there's no such thing as a church that teaches sound doctrine. So that's another one of the big eye openers that I've seen. So like that's my big calling in life now, is like I put together Bible studies and I try to teach people God's word to the best of my ability, because there's nobody's teaching it right now. There's no such thing as a church. Like there are some people teaching it because that's what woke me up. I saw some good teachings from some dudes on YouTube that have some good Bible study stuff. I found it in the Bible myself, and then I started seeking more knowledge from dudes that were already, studied up more than me. But in your average church, like there's no such thing as a building with a steeple on top that teaches sound doctrine. That's non-existent in the world. And I know people find that really hard to believe.
I don't.
But, I've been over it with Zach a bunch, and I know Zach sees it too. And
we've been studying this quite a bit. I get into the books and study little by little here and there and whatnot, and then just kind of bounce questions and ideas off Mike. And then so one thing I found out about Mike is anything that he says is generally pretty well backed up by some sort of research, whether it be this, the Twin Towers or, what have you. Mike probably has some pretty good data to back it up. Like, it's not just foaming at the mouth. There's something behind it. Because every time I ask a question, go to this chapter, this verse, everything's right there. Like, you can't deny it.
It's completely opposite of you, Zach.
Completely. I'm shoot by the hip now.
That's one of the ways that I was first able to figure out there was a problem, because I started studying the Bible and studying it and studying it and studying it before I even found out I could find sound teachings on like the internet, like on YouTube from some preachers. Before I found that out, like we were just going to a regular church, and I started going up to the preacher. I'm like, "Hey, dude, what's up with this?" "Oh man, that doesn't apply to us." Blah blah. I'm like, "Well, the Bible says that it does." And then they're like, "Oh, man, you got to stop reading your Bible, man. Like that Bible will confuse you." And I said, "It don't confuse me. It confuses me as whether I should be in this building right now is about the only confusion I got."
I guess I was going to side skirt this. Zach and I have had this conversation about religion and the Bible, et cetera, in the past. I'm not super religious or, et cetera. I'm extremely spiritual. I when I go in nature, I get, there's something there for me. I get lost. But I guess like tangibly or specifically, you have me intrigued, which is, anybody who knows me knows that I firmly believe, now I'm just laying it all out there for you. And there's a lot of I'm probably going to play this on what I call my Innovators podcast, which is where they pay a small monthly subscription, but these are guys and girls who are truly like the elite when it comes to wildlife management, hunting, ranching, farming. Like they're serious. They dig deep on stuff, everything from the economics of gold, to obviously what we're talking about, and everything else, whitetail deer ecology and turkey habitat, et cetera, hunting. But I've made the comment, and many of my listeners Grant's looking at me like out of the side of his eye, like, where the hell is he going with this? He should probably shut up. That when somebody is heavily pushing religion, and Zach, you know who I'm thinking about right now, somebody who has screwed me in the past. Like I was going to ask you guys about friendly fire too. Like, are there ever any guys you just want to turn and gut shoot? Because I can think of a whole pile of people in my community here I want to gut shoot. But I've had people in business like absolutely screw me, and I don't like contracts. I like handshakes. I just think that karma's real, and if you screw me, it's going to be a long, nasty life for you eventually, whether I'm involved or not. I just don't think it's right treating people like that. But I have found, and I have listeners right now listening, and I have had personal conversations with so many of them, that when somebody feels the need to push the Bible, I'm thinking probably more from a conventional standpoint as opposed to what Mike's talking about right now. That's why I'm so intrigued. They justify things. They use it and interpret it in their own to benefit their
agendas, just like these politicians.
Exactly, and
they really do. And you said you're not religious, and like, not trying to cut you off, but that's a good thing, because like one of my buddies asked me, and I did a video on this and put it on YouTube, but I was like explaining my theology, because he asked me to explain my theology. I was like, my theology is about obedience. That's all it is. That's what the whole Bible's about. Obedience. God said, do this, do it. And then nobody did it. So then he sent his son to be like, hey, check it out. I'm serious. Do this. And then nobody did it. So then his son, died for our sins, right? But the key is we've got to be obedient. And when we're obedient, we can't have any loyalties to any religious system, because all of the religious systems teach disobedience, which is the number one thing the Bible warns against. It's said constantly throughout the entire Old Testament, the prophets warning about, do not be disobedient, come back to the Father and do what he says, yet no one does. And it's the whole story. You can summarize it that quick. Be obedient, do what God wants you to do, live a good life, and obey him, and then you're good to go. But no churches teach that stuff.
I remember as a kid, my grandparents were extremely involved in their church. So we didn't live near them until later on. So, but when we were back in town, my brother and I had to go to church, and usually we were just screwing around. But I can remember one time they had one of these coat giveaways or whatever. You turn in your winter coats to give the people who can't afford it. And I was just sitting there, and they were kind of talking about, I say they, like just the people of the church, the adults, and I was probably 12. and they were talking about so and so who comes dressed like this, and so who looks like that, and I was like, wait a minute, are you guys? I thought you weren't supposed to judge. Like, shouldn't they be able to come and like cheap worn out shoes and pants they borrowed from somebody and still find like religion and somebody who accepts them? And I think I just remember all the adults looking at me. I was like, okay, this is awkward. Was I not supposed to ask that question?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right about that stuff. And here's the thing, like the problem is it's just like with the world. People are too busy working 5 jobs just to stay afloat to where they can't actually dig into what's going on. They got to watch Fox News or Newsmax or one of these trash organizations to push them propaganda. And they just believe the propaganda because they don't have time to dig into it themselves. They got to take what these people say.
Exactly.
It's the same thing with church. People are going to churches and they're like, I ain't got time for this. Hey, what's up, preacher? Tell me what it's about. And he's like, hey, what's up? Hey, you can do whatever you want. Just give me some money.
Yeah,
and then that's what he tells you.
Yeah.
But the thing is, nobody actually reads their Bibles. The Bible says completely differently than what churches teach.
My girlfriend often tells me that she believes that some of the best Christians can be the ones that don't go to church every Sunday and are the ones that sit there.
Sunday's actually a bad day. Sunday is a pagan holiday.
Yeah,
Mike,
Sunday's
we went
not
over
even
that.
the right day. Like that's a key thing. Look in your Bible. Exodus chapter 20, it talks about the 10 commandments. The Sabbath is one of those. Most people will tell you got to keep the 10 commandments. But then you ask them, that's one of the things I got into my preacher. I'm like, what's up with this 4th one right here? How come we don't do the 4th one? It says on Saturday we're supposed to go to church on the Sabbath day. And he's like, oh, yeah, that doesn't apply to us. That's only to the Jews. And I'm like, okay. Started scratching my head. And then I started digging into that whole topic. I'm like, everything in the Bible applies to every single person, not just Jews this and Gentiles that. So yeah, that's a huge one.
I think some preacher just decided he wanted to watch college football on Saturday.
There you go.
It was the Catholic Pope that did it in the Council of Laodicea in 336 AD. They changed it.
Did he have boys in the room with him? Sorry, that was wrong.
That's why I like Zach. He always says what I'm thinking, even when I don't say it. He's that 1% of the time that I actually censor it.
Oh, again, Mike, we've had these conversations too. This is the beautiful thing about what we're talking about right now, because I think Mike, would expect this out of me at some point. And I think I've been a little less candid than most of the times with Mike, but I think he knows the way I think and the way I feel. So this is probably right on par.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. I mean, I wanted to do something for my innovators and talk about Memorial Day because, like, I've often said this in the past, like it's like the 4th of July and Memorial Day and all this stuff. Like, people think that, when they hear that holiday, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, Memorial Day's coming up. I better get the pool ready. I better get the Traeger ready. And we better get some hot dogs and hamburgers. And they're all sold out at Walmart or whatever. I'm like, you guys are missing the point. And it's funny because a lot of them are voting in the opposite direction. Not that voting really matters anymore. And, they just...
Mike, you got stories on that?
Yeah, I can talk about that for a while, too.
Election integrity.
Well, there is election theft, right? Yeah, there's tons of ballots stolen, but here's the key. It's more simple than this. It doesn't count anyway. None of these votes count. You're literally wasting gas and oxygen by breathing on the way to the voting pool.
Exactly.
So, vote. You're literally wasting your time, oxygen, and gas by going to vote. Whoever's going to be the next president, that dude knows it. And the other one knows that he's not going to be. I don't know who it is. I'm not in the end crew, but I've seen enough to where our election system is an absolute illusion that we even have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I voted, I was in Mississippi at college, and I went to an all-black church, which was kind of a culture shock for me. Not saying anything other than I grew up in farm country, Pennsylvania, and I was like, wow, actually it was me and my girlfriend then, now wife, and we were like, wow, look at this. This is kind of historic for us. And I voted for George W. I remember telling my dad in college, I was like, man, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. This is crazy. thinking that I would even vote for Al Gore, although Bush is just as much of an asshole as Gore.
Yeah.
But I remember walking into that church and I was like I was
If
young.
not more.
There's another one for you, right? I was young and I was just like, there's something going on here that's just kind of like, wow, this is kind of weird for me. But I remember everybody, I was like, I'm not going to vote. That's stupid. I'm going to go, I don't know, whatever, go study. And everybody was like, come on, man, that's your American duty. Like, men and women have died for your right to vote, right? Like, these are all the things that are ingrained in our heads. And I remember, I know there's a lot there to unpack, and Mike's like chomping at the bit at all that, but here's one that bothers me, because honestly, very few people can get me to bite on the religion story, and Mike just did that. So that's kind of cool. But I think it was Pete Hegseth who did a piece on Fox News, and I hate Fox. The owners of Fox, their wives are all liberals, and they're all, I won't say what they are, but I know the guy who built the Fox headquarters, and I hunted with him on the Peace River of Quebec. And when you're not hunting, there's nothing to do on the Peace River in Quebec except fly fish. And I heard all of the stories about the cocktail parties with these women and what they truly believe when they get drunk. But I guess I don't know really where I was going with that, other than that story with Pete Hegseth. And Pete, I think he burned his college diploma, or where did he go? He went to Harvard or Yale or both, I don't know, and he burned them. And he did this whole piece on the miseducation of America and about the education system, and talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. And Pete's obviously a veteran and a warrior, and he was talking,
which we don't do at school anymore.
You don't do the pledge?
Nope.
Really? And I've always thought the pledge is important, right? And then Pete kind of he went back to the pledge, and it was all this part of making Americans, like, I don't know, not subservient, but just
indoctrination.
Exactly. And I was in watching Fox News, and I like Pete a lot. I mean, obviously he's getting paid still by Fox, and he would censor whatever, unlike Tucker, I'm sure. But I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So now we go to a lot of softball games because my daughter plays travel softball. And every time like the national anthem for me used to be like, shut up. And if there was a kid talking, I wanted to beat the piss out of him or her. Like, shut your damn mouth, look at the flag, and think about all the people who died for your ass to stand here and play a lousy game, right? And now I stand there and I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I start to question everything. Like, is this a scam? Am I getting crazy with this stuff now, or what?
No, dude, it's honestly.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. I was probably that dude that would punch somebody in the face just for not putting their hand over their heart back in the day. Like, I'd be like, hey, I fought for this country. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where I
Colin
used to
Kaepernick.
Be. Yeah, I would have kicked that dude right in his afro. You know what I mean? Back in the day. But now I would probably go give that dude a big hug. You know what I mean? Seriously, like, I was wrong. And here's the reason why. It is part of the indoctrination, for one. It just makes us vest into this entity that has nothing to do with anything else, really. It's our country. It makes us loyal to the country so that we believe all the propaganda. It's just one little piece that builds us up to being into this machine to where we follow everything it says and wants us to do.
Exactly. Right? A bunch of subservient minions running around, putting our masks on and taking our COVID jabs to the arm.
Exactly. And the biblical aspect of this too is that, like, and I just have to tie this in, is we're not supposed to pledge allegiance to anything except for God. So, I mean, there's a whole other piece to it.
I don't think that's why they cut it out of school, Grant. Like, Grant's patriotic and loves his country, but I think he's pissed off because they cut it out of school. I'm not sure.
They used to play, they would do the whole Pledge of Allegiance, whole national anthem every morning.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know they cut it out of school.
And they don't even play it. Did they play it before football games this year?
There were a lot of times, especially during
maybe?
COVID, I noticed, like in Texas and stuff, they didn't even have a flag on the pole.
Oh.
It was like, let's just ignore this and avoid this and not even do it.
Wow.
I'm not sure what that was about, but
My only thing is, what's the agenda behind that? You know what I mean? Because like, I don't trust whoever's doing away with it has a clean agenda either.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. When everything I hear in the news, like if I don't ever watch news anymore, but I used to be glued to Fox News and Newsmax all the time. But if I do watch it and I see stuff, I'm like, what are they trying to make me think?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are they trying to lead me to what outcome? And that's the way we have to look at it. Everything we're being taught externally from any type of media source, we have to think, what is their agenda and what are they trying to influence me to do?
Yeah, and they're so good at it, and it's crazy because we're all grown ass adults, yet we sit there and let it. I mean, we watch it. How about it, Grant? I mean, Fox News is running nonstop, and I hate the channel. But my wife believes I've got to see, like you said, I've got to see and hear what they want us to believe. And she's big on Twitter now, but I need to see what's going on so I can judge and decide what exactly.
Right.
I know this is crazy, but I got into hunting television like in 2006-ish or whatever. And I was in a camp where they were filming for a Realtree hunting show. And I was actually just there to kill a management buck, not a part of it. So I was just hanging around camp. And they had all the cameras and jibs and cranes. And, you couldn't even sit and watch college ball without a camera floating past you. And I remember one of the head guy, I won't even mention the show, shot a buck. And I watched the film. And I was like, oh, cool. He dropped right in the Sendero. And I know what gun he killed it with. And this was a guy who pushes religion big time, by the way, like big time, a lot.
Oh, really? Shoots
a buck, and now Remington's a sponsor, so he shoots the buck with this highly tweaked out long-range rifle that is not a Remington, right? So that gun quickly goes back in the pickup, grabs a Remington, goes out, starts taking pictures, and I'm like, well, that seems kind of non-Christian-like or whatever he is. And then the buck literally dropped right in the Sendero. Like, it didn't even know what happened. And they're like, well, we've got a big track job. This I didn't get to see this until later on when I watched the show. I was like, hey, that's when I was in camp. I'm going to watch it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a minute, this is nothing like what actually happened. And I'm an adult, right? I'm like 30 years old. And I'm sitting there laughing at the fact that I'm surprised that this is bullshit, right?
That you just realized you've been lied to in hunting videos.
Exactly. Yeah, and it ruined my entire childhood. Like, I've been a dick since. So I blame it on that. But it's funny because I was there. I know exactly what happened. I know what gun he killed it with. I know that the blind he killed it in, and I know the buck died right there. And they literally drug the animal into the South Texas brush to do it was like a 30-yard stalk that they slowed down and made it look like it took an hour to find this animal in the South Texas brush. And I was like, wow. My point here is it made me realize that even when you know it's bullshit, they're so good. And this is hunting TV. They're not even nearly as good, but they're very good at making you think you saw something else. That's crazy.
Yeah, they do that. I mean, that goes on in every aspect of everything that we watch. Like that's why, it was a hard transition to do. But my wife and I and my daughter here at our family, we don't watch anything on TV. Like, we don't even, we watch certain things to study, we do Bible study stuff via that, but we don't watch or consume anything on TV because it's all trash, man. It really is. When you really when you get into it as deep as I am, studying, you'll be like, man, that's not good to watch. I shouldn't be watching that.
That's good stuff.
I do have one thing to chime in. This one's kind of eating at me, and no one has to agree.
We know, Zach, you watch CNN. We get it.
Golly, you caught me. I would say on the the whole anthem and whatnot, it's not about the anthem necessarily or the Pledge of Allegiance itself and the words that are spoken during that statement. It is for the dudes that we lost that fought for something that they truly believed in. They joined the military, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the dudes that were in with us came from just dirt poor families, and this was their only way out. Yeah, no, that's a good point of a way to look at it too.
feel better about doing the pledge is like that it's for those dudes at least, because you're right. And speaking of this being like a Memorial Day thing, you're right, man. A lot of those dudes that come in the military that I serve with, come from dirt poor situations, man. And that, the military is the only thing that would pull them out of that poverty. There's a mix too, but a lot of guys come from like super humble backgrounds,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So when I joined right after September 11th, one of the stories that I remember vividly, I mean, I remember this like it was yesterday. We were sitting there at MEPS up in Lansing, and it was this black dude from Detroit was sitting with me, and we went through the whole MEPS procedure and so forth and whatever. And we got to become friends in that day and a half that we were up there. And we were talking and whatnot, and they're like, hey, Zach Bola, come in here, whatever, go in there. And he's like, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I want to be an engineer. And he's like, okay, well, I got this, and this. I was like, well, okay, I want to be, when does this one leave? And he's like, well, builder, you could leave like in 2 days. Equipment operator, you'll be in debt for 6 months. I was like, well, I got to think about this. Like 2 days, that's pretty quick, right? And so I went back out and I sat next to this dude. I can't even remember his name. And I wish I did, because we were sitting there and he's like, man, what'd they say? I was like, they told me that I could be a builder and leave in 2 days, or I could go EO and leave in like 6 months, be in debt for 6 months. And he's like, dude, if you don't want to take the builder, I'll go in there right now. He's like, I was going to go in like an unrated EO or whatever. He's like, I was going to go in and do whatever just to get the hell out of Detroit. I was like, what? He's like, well, either I'm going to die in the military or I'm going to die in Detroit. It doesn't really matter, does it? He's like, my mom will get $200,000. I was like, okay, so what do you think? He was like, dude, I'm telling you. He's like, go in, and the one that leaves in 2 days, he's like, take it. He's like, it's better than sitting around thinking about it for 6 months. It's like, man, that's a good idea, right? Like, makes sense. He's like, I'm going to sit here for 6 months and go back to Detroit. What do I have to look forward to? I was like, that's a really good point. So I was like, hey, I want to be a builder. He's like, all right, you're going to be a combat engineer in the Navy Seabees, Here you go. Bam. You're going to get on a plane in 2 days and you're going to go to boot camp. I was like, all right. So then when I get to boot camp, this dude's standing next to me, and it was another black kid from the South. We got our crappy ass New Balance tennis shoes. And this kid's just standing there looking at his tennis shoes. I was like, dude, what are you looking at? He's like, this is the first new pair of shoes I've ever had. I said, what? And he's like, yeah, this is the first brand new pair of shoes I've ever had.
Yeah, not surprised, man. That's the way it is, man. There's a lot of people like that in the world that come into the military, man.
It was a culture shock, from a little guy from, Three Rivers, Michigan, little podunk nowhere. It was a shock. I was just like, man, I thought everybody was just like middle class, black, white, didn't matter. We're all middle class folks and we just do our thing. No, life was not like that. So then, I take into account, the Pledge of Allegiance and so forth. It's not necessarily an allegiance, in my opinion, but it's like the dudes that we lost, like Eric Knott, when he got killed in Fallujah and whatnot. It's like he came from nothing. He believed in something. And that's what that represents to me, is that belief that, when you have no hope, that was their little sliver of hope. Like, that was their little out. So
I'm with you on that, man.
Higher level.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. That's a dang good way to put it. And you're right. And there's nothing dishonorable about that. Like about saying, pledging the allegiance to remember those dudes, because there's been, and like back to what we were talking about earlier, there's been a lot of those dudes who have died, and for what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the bad thing. It's for nothing. But when they died, they believed in something. Like that was what they believed in at the time, right, wrong, or indifferent. But that's the way they felt. They joined for a reason. They believed in it enough to, they didn't choose to die, but it just happened.
Yep. No, you're exactly right.
So that's kind of the way that I always think about it. Like I said, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I don't agree with, the constructs of our society nowadays at all. Jason, you know this for a fact. But that's kind of one of the things that keeps me near and dear to my heart is like, hey, let's at least honor that, just to honor them, because they gave it up. Right or wrong, they gave it up.
Yep.
Yeah,
I wish
one little way we can take care of them.
I wish you would give up signing off all of your texts with your pronouns. That's getting old.
Oh my God.
Her, him.
Yeah.
My God. Hey, that right there is a culture shock to me. So
I still don't understand it. I was just telling my 14-year-old dog, I don't get it. I don't get all this shit they're doing. I don't understand it, and I don't want to.
There was talks about putting a litter box in our bathroom at school.
Did you hear that, Bola?
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, they've been talking about that at our little country school. My daughter just came. We were walking heifers tonight, and she's like, "Oh, this little girl came to school with these cat ears on," and one of the teachers, God bless her, she said, "You know, you're going to get ridiculed for this." Like she outright told her, like, you're going to get ridiculed. So whatever you get, you got coming to you. I was like, oh, thank you, lady. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
She's fired tomorrow. Well, I guess she can't
be
fired.
I see these dang emails. I got some of these companies that we deal with, and their emails will come back, and I see on the bottom, like, she, her, him, or whatever it is. I'm like, what the heck is this crap?
I remember the first time I saw that was, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago now. I interviewed a girl who was just starting a master's project at like UT or somewhere. And I was trying to get together this interview, and the project was kind of cool. She was looking at like ground nesting birds in regenerative agriculture versus like conventional, heavy tillage, chemical use, whatever, synthetics. And I was intrigued. I was like, that's kind of cool because that's what I'm doing. And she's like, yeah, I can do it here. And I'm like, I actually did it. I was so stupid to the whole thing. It's like 2-3 years ago. I responded like, what is this? He, she, her, them, they, whatever. And she was like, oh, those are my pronouns. And I was like, oh, do I really want to do this with this person? Like, what the hell?
What does it even mean? I'm still out in left field on this whole thing.
Grant,
I guess if it's a girl, they want to let you know that they're a girl, and that, or they might be a boy, but their name is a girl name. Yeah, but they look like a girl, but they want to be a boy. So then they're like he, him, I guess.
Or it's a
Remember Crocodile Dundee?
Pedophile that wants
it's a psychological disorder. That's what it is.
Exactly.
It's a psychological disorder.
Well, they want attention is what it boils down to.
Yeah, that and their endocrine systems are so fricked up because of the food system that we have now and all the chemicals and the 5G phones that the kids can't put down. It's everybody's screwed up. Testosterone is at an all-time low, and
that's apparent.
Yeah, that's 100% fact.
I didn't even intend to get into this stuff, but I mean, it's always fair game on my podcast. So I guess.
Well, me and Mike actually talked about this just from the food aspect about what they want to do on their farm and whatnot. And it's like, I want to raise my own cattle the right way and have food for my family, whatever excess there is, we sell it and, move on. And Mike, you guys are doing honey and.
Yes.
Yeah, we got bees. We're doing, we'll have some honey production this year anyway. And then we've got chickens. We're trying to expand our chickens. We're trying to get some cows and some goats and stuff like that. But it's just one of those things that I don't know. Like, I know Zach's been trying to help me out with this a bunch, but it's a hard nut to crack with everything being as expensive as it is. I need like $20,000-$30,000 worth of fence. And like, who can afford that? You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much
taxpayers.
That I was telling my wife. What's that?
Taxpayers.
So I've actually been working on that. Like, so I've talked to people from Mike's County. I was like, hey, what grants or
Mike
what
needs a fence.
watershed programs? I'm like, what do you have? And they're all ignorant. They're like, well, if you go down to the county down to the south of us, I'm like, well, we're not in the county to the south. You're the county that we're dealing with. And they're like, well, we can do cross fencing. I was like, well, what good is cross fencing without perimeter fencing?
Fence, yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, it's a good point. I really don't know. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is painful.
Yeah. So that's what I've run into. And now it's like, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, we just go ahead and slow roll this thing. It might
There you
take
go.
us 10 years to get there, but
Yeah.
we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So we're finally coming back to the fact that you settled down after this military deal. I guess I'm talking to Mike. Zach's the same way. Zach's a farmer. And you're going to get into, farming and ranching and all this good stuff. The honey's cool. I have bees here, and I've got a pretty impressive story that I could share at some point with you on the bees at my place, and just the hive collapse in our area. And I begged a beekeeper for years to put them on my farm. I'm like, listen, man, I'm doing things differently. And he's like, Jason, they're just dying left and right. It's just not worth it. And finally he did it. And I think we did it for 2.5 years, and he unexpectedly passed away like quickly. But some of the stuff him and I did here, he was like, Jason, I've been beekeeping. I don't know. He was a beak for like 45 years, I think. And he was like, I can't believe we're able to do some of the advanced stuff we've done here. And then as a crow flies up around like conventional farms, I don't know, probably 2 miles, maybe tops. They can't keep a damn bee alive. And ours were like, we were doing splits, and he was sending them to other people. It was pretty cool. So pretty eye opening.
Dang. That's the way we're doing it in our house. We're probably 2 miles or so straight line distance from any normal agricultural crops that, get sprayed down with like tons of biohazard all the time, but our bees are doing pretty good too, but there's a lot to it. So me and my wife were like struggling for the first year or so. And then we have some friends that are getting into the bee business. They're going to start like having their own apiary and selling bees and all that kind of stuff too. So we worked out a deal with them, and they come by once a week, check on our bees, and then we'll get it suited up and we'll go watch and see what they do and learn from them. Mm-hmm. And then, so they're teaching us while managing our bees. And then in turn, we're just trading them honey and like eggs and bread and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it, because it is like, I travel a fair amount, and I've got a new beekeeper now who's awesome, and it's intense. But the crazy thing is, when you start to learn about him, like, he'll feed me information every time, and I'm just blown away by how the hive works. It's almost, I remember being in college and like having evolution or having a class on ecology, and you're like, wow, that's crazy that nature can do that and figure that out. I think bees are probably one of the most fascinating critters on earth. And the cool thing is, they're not native here. I love it when everybody gets on this native platform and they're like, everything must be native or naturalized. And I'm like, you kidding me? Honeybees are not native, and they do some pretty badass stuff. And we all like honey, except for my mother-in-law, who's weird as hell. But it's crazy how much, how many people, especially the liberal, those who are like, we'll call them tree huggers or whatever, for lack of better terms. And they're like, oh my gosh, you can't plant all of these species. They're not native. Like sun hemp, Zach, that triggers me.
Yeah.
Sun hemp is noxious. I'm like, no, you're noxious. And all of this, like I said, the one the other day, corn. I'm like, okay, I can't plant any native species because of this conservation easement. What about corn? And by the way, corn doesn't come off the cob pink. That's called a neonicotinoid, and it's systemic, and it's killing a shit ton of insects, and it's causing all kind of health problems with the white-tailed deer and wild turkeys. And you're worried
about, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you're worried about a species that's not native, that is performing absolutely perfectly in the ecological system I have. So it's another one of those deals where people don't think.
So this GMO corn is messing with deer?
So I do believe, yes, that GMO is in its own right. I think more GMO, in my opinion, this might trigger Zach a little bit because he's a farmer, and I get it. But well, anytime you add something or you screw with genes, you take away. But
Yeah.
but the neonicotinoids that are also on those flea and tick collars that people put on their dogs, and they're destroying their dog's health. Neonics are like, I've done 2 or 3 podcasts. There's so much out there on neonics. I'll give you for example, the farmer neighbor. I'm buying the farm next to me, and the farmer's still farming it. And I was like, listen, you don't have to listen to me because I didn't close yet, but my bees are like right here on the north part of my farm, and they border this farm I'm buying. What are you doing to this southernmost field? Can you do me a favor and not spray the shit out of it? Or at least be considerate. Like, you don't have to. You could say, hey, screw off, Snavely. I'm going to do whatever I want. And then I'll spend the rest of my life making your life miserable. Or you can just honor me and be like, yeah, cool. How about a little bit of honey? And I would have thrown it his way. But my 14-year-old daughter was with me, and he's like, you know what? I haven't sprayed an insecticide in, I don't know what he said, 7 years. And I was like, come on, this dude is so, his inputs are through the roof. So I was like, okay. I jumped on the Ranger, and my daughter's like, you're going to check that, aren't you? And I was like, you damn right I am. I pulled up to the field, which is, 40, 50 yards past my bees. And I pulled my pocket knife out as I jumped off the Ranger because I was going to dig down in and pop a soybean out. And I didn't have to. I said to my daughter, I was like, look at, the beans laying on the surface. I said, do you really think that soybeans produce pink seeds? And she's like, no, what is that? I said, that's an insecticide that they wrap around a seed. And they're like, oh, we're gonna be really good to the butterflies and the bees, and we're not gonna spray an insecticide that is non-selective and just wipes out the beneficials and the pests. We're gonna wrap it around the seed so it only takes out those that are pests and that eat the soybeans or corn or whatever it is. What they don't realize is those bees will forage on those soybeans when they flower. And that neonic it's systemic. So when that plant grows, it takes it up in that plant. And obviously all the reproductive segments of that plant possess that neonic. So, there's so much on the spleen and kidney damage and liver damage and whitetails. And it's catastrophic. And
not to mention humans. You look at the reproductive cycle of girls nowadays is like 3 years earlier than it was in the 1940s.
And the fact that Grant has boys graduating with him right now as a senior who I coached in football, and now they want to be girls.
Oh, Jesus, Mary.
Yeah. Wow.
That shit's very
real.
It's
crazy. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the main reason we want to do this stuff is we want to have control over all of our own food.
Yep.
Or at least the vast majority of it. Because that stuff is so toxic out there. And I have immense pain problems, chronic pain problems, obviously from abusing my body for 20 something years. And, one of the smallest, most elite units there was, you know what I mean? So I've really abused my body. And so everything I can do to mitigate that pain really helps. And so my wife's like, it's all about food. We got to get rid of these toxins in our food. Exactly. So we're trying to do that. And in the end, if I'm producing all of my own food, I'm going to have a lot of excess. Just, by the fact of the matter, I'm going to have a lot of excess. So I figure might as well start up a farmer's market or something to sell the excess. Then we can make a little money off of it. We're saving tons of money by producing our own food, but then we can make a little money on the side by selling the excess. I think it's a win-win situation. So that's what our plan is to do. But I've just got to subsidize it for another decade or so.
The thing is, Jason, Mike's farm's not small. How many acres are there? 250, Mike? 250,
yeah.
That's not a small farm.
No, not at all. That's big.
Yeah, that's a big size farm.
When he's talking about excess, it's funny because during COVID, remember when everybody started their own gardens? We started one, and I was using all the chicken stuff from my chickens and growing these amazing veggies. And we were growing at the time, I was drinking more jalapeno margaritas, and we were growing great jalapenos. And we were like, holy shit, what are we going to do with all these tomatoes and jalapeno? We didn't know what to do with them all. And our garden was, what is that, Grant? 10 by 15 or 10 by 12. And a family of 4
pretty small.
Can't even consume it all.
Yeah. and we're going to try to like can a bunch of it, put a bunch of it up. But then, there's obviously going to be a lot that you can't keep, and then like to sell it on the side. I mean, there's a lot of little farmers markets emerging around here, but I think if we could get in on it sooner rather than later, we could make a killing off of it.
Yeah.
But that's my thing is like, I've been wanting to do this for like 4 or 5 years now, and I've seen other people do it, and all the other farmers markets that have started up have gone, I mean, like viral. I mean, these things, like there's one down the road started as this one little, they bought one of those old grain silos and like cut it open and made a little building out of it to sell out of it. It was one grain silo. Now this is an entire complex of buildings. Like they're selling like cooked food on site, like everything. And I talked to the ladies running it. They were like, they were like, we would love to expand, but we're making so much money off of this thing. Like we don't even have time to expand. But they told me they're making like millions of dollars a year off of this one little bitty farmer's market down the road.
Yeah, and
that's what I was telling Mike. I was like, dude, you need to just open like a little farm store right on your farm. Like at the end of the drive, put a little shack up and sell tomatoes and stuff. Like you can make a killing off that.
Yeah.
I thought about that, but here's one of the deals I'm dealing with that. My driveway ends on a dirt road that goes down, that comes into another dirt road that goes down into another dirt road that goes to the paved road.
And then you hear banjos playing.
Yeah. So nobody's going to just stop by because nobody ever drives by our road because we're the only people who live on this road. But I need a venue on the highway, and there's actually a place right at the end of our dirt road that I would love to get my hands on and remodel into like a little farmer's market. It'd be killer.
And Zach, you and I talk about this all the time because I understand you do a lot of seed production and you have a lot of agriculture and obviously your cows, but I get it. Like this whole we need to feed the world stuff is garbage. Like we need to stop worrying about the world and just do what Mike's talking about. Yeah, and feed our communities. And that has to come from the consumer. And the consumers right now want that. Like they're starting to realize, holy shit, the food that we eat, the old food is medicine. They're starting to realize that stuff because their kids, their grandparents, or their parents, we're sicker, we're fatter, we're more stressed out than we've ever been. And a lot of it has to do with our food system. I was up in New York visiting with a client, and we weren't far from the city. And my client works as a physician in the city and upstate New York, and they made me dinner, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. Everything was like all the veggies. I'm going to call them nutrient dense because I think I have enough nutrient wisdom to look at nutritional wisdom to look at these things and taste. It's like eating the tomato out of your garden as opposed to from the grocery store, right? You just know. You're like,
for sure.
That tastes amazing, or the onions, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we drove around that night and we went to a regenerative restaurant. And the food was absolutely amazing. And as we were driving around, there were all these farms that were regenerative. Some were organic, and there were all versions in between that you could imagine, right? And obviously, there's the transparency where you have to stop, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I believe in. It's whatever. But the thing that blew my mind was there was so much available, and the consumers were spending a crap ton of money to do it. And it makes you think, like you said, you're in, like where the banjos are playing. I don't know if you listened to my podcast with Will Harris from White Oak Pastures. Will is in Bluffton, Georgia, and
I sent that to Mike.
Yeah, he talks about it being the poorest county or whatever in Georgia. And I mean, we buy stuff. Obviously, you have e-commerce. Yeah, you have that place on the highway that you can go. I like that. But you have e-commerce now where people will buy your products, your honey, and, just be not only, I mean, there's a bunch of regenerative honey out there, but they'll buy your story, and they'll buy you, and they appreciate that now. One of the things, like I've been buying organic for years at our grocery store, and I'm not saying organic is the holy grail, but I try to eliminate some things from my family's diet. And it was, I had to go to a special aisle. We called it the organic aisle, a special aisle and like a subsection of the aisle to get organic ketchup or whatever. Now everything in the store has an organic option, and it's no longer in a separate aisle. It's sitting right next to the Heinz ketchup or whatever. It's, an organic brand. And I'm like, okay, they wouldn't do that if the people were not demanding that and buying that. And ironically, there's these organic green beans in this section in my grocery store, and I started buying them, and my kids were like, holy crap, these green beans are good. And I was like, yeah, how about it? And then before I knew it, I'd go to the store. Like, I'm one of these guys that goes to the store at like 2:00 to make dinner at 4 or 5 o'clock. I'd run over there at 2:00 and they were sold out. And I was like, shit. Come back the next day and there's like 3 bags there. So I buy all 3. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one doing this. There's a bunch of soccer moms out there who are finally demanding, to eliminate the toxins, or they're tasting what I'm tasting as well. It's not just a feel good, no chemical thing. It's, wow, this stuff tastes good again. I think it was Fred Provenza. Fred's stuff is amazing, and I co-presented with Fred out in Springfield, Missouri, back beginning of the year. And Fred was like, the reason kids don't eat vegetables anymore is because they don't taste like vegetables used to be. They're disgusting. They're watered down and there's no flavor.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. I haven't eaten a store-bought egg in probably 4 years or so, because we produce more than enough already of chicken eggs. And, we went recently somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and ended up eating a store-bought egg. And I was like, man, this thing's disgusting. I mean, it has no fun. It was like yellow foam. Yeah. I was like, this is just nasty crap right here. Our eggs are so rich. Like, when we first started eating our own personal eggs, we had to like mix it up with something because they were so rich.
Yes.
But now we just love that flavor.
Bright orange. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like eating K-Rat eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. We went through the same thing. When I first got into chickens, I had we had a Great Pyrenees, and we had 4 goats that he protected, and I got rid of the goats. This goat yoga lady took the goats, work on that one for a while, and so the Pyrenees was like most Americans, he was underemployed. So I was like, listen, I'm going to get you some chickens to give you something to do, because as you know, it's a working dog and they need something to work with. And I was planting cover crops, and I had it's probably a 6 to 8 acre cover crop field, just nasty, like 15 different way blend cover crops. And I was like, I'm just going to cut the chickens loose. I mean, we've got eagles and hawks and you name it. But I'm going to let him just kind of float around the pasture with them. And he'd just walk out there and lay down. And it was hilarious. They would just walk around them and peck and run throughout these cover crops and eat insects and whatever. And then they started laying eggs. And like you said, they were like orange like carrots. And the shells were super thick and the yolks didn't run. And at first my kids were like, this is disgusting. These are weird. Like, what's going on? I'm not eating that. And now they're, when they see the stuff at, like, I don't know if you're at a hotel or something, they're like, that come out of a container? That's gross. I'm not eating that shit. So I'm with you on that. But I think that right there just goes to show, when they have a diverse diet like that, the nutrient density is through the roof. And although we've lost our nutritional wisdom because of like things that make our taste buds do backflips, like Doritos, we can retrain that nutritional wisdom if we work at it.
Yeah, I've found that because my wife's forcing me to try to eat, because I don't eat the healthiest a lot of times, but I'm starting to eat better and better now. But my taste buds are changing. But another thing I wanted to mention too, and that's a good point that you brought up, because Zach's talking about doing a farmer's market right here at the house, and I'd love to do that, because I do think a lot of people would get a lot out of coming out, and then they could actually see where the chickens are at, and it just makes them feel better. Like, hey, these chickens are being raised right. They're not all disgusting. These people aren't lying to me. But you talked about the e-commerce thing, and that's another thing that I thought about too, is setting up a website, and then we could sell it like that, because we have right now we get a lot of stuff from a farm down the road. It's like 10 minutes from us. It's called Twice Blessed Farms or something like that. And my wife can go on her phone and like order stuff from them, and then they'll just text her and tell her when it's ready. And then she just drives up there, and they have like a place where you can just come pick it up. It's kind of like the honor box type deal. Like you just go down to money, and grab the stuff and roll. And she bought 2 gallons of milk, like raw milk, and then a bunch of sourdough bread, some sourdough cookies, and all kinds of stuff from them last time. So yeah, e-commerce, that may work.
Yeah. A lot of them are doing that
sourdough bread thing. I don't know what it is, but this sourdough bread thing is like, it's insane right now. I don't know what the rave is on sourdough bread.
I know
Sourdough
it's
bread
the girl's
cookie.
trend.
It's he, she, her, them.
They, him.
And Hems are doing it too.
They're doing it. They're probably the driver behind it.
Hey, I know I am, because my wife got a bunch of that sourdough bread, and we were cutting a piece off of it and making like garlic toast out of it for dinner with our dinner each night. And then, oh my God, there was this other good honey, like it was like is honey, but it almost has like some sort of cream mixed with it. It's almost like honey butter.
Mm.
And she got some of that from that farm too. I was putting that stuff on that fresh sourdough bread. Oh my gosh. She's like, you ate all the bread, didn't you? I'm like, well, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Just let it go bad?
Yeah. There's no preservatives in that bread. You got to eat it quick.
Yeah, we got to eat it fast.
I make my own breads also, and it goes quick. Like the kids will eat it for breakfast and then dinner, and it's gone.
My daughter's doing that for a 4-H project right now, and her and my mother-in-law are making this bread together, and it is freaking bomb. I'm like, dang, yeah, bring that home. That loaf's gone in like a day.
Yeah, it's not like that shit from the grocery store.
Exactly.
So good.
Now,
stuff.
there is one thing that I want to, Mike, there's a story. We're going to go back to the military real quick. That story when you guys raided that Taliban compound, I think people would love to hear that story. I think that's probably one of the best stories that I've heard so far. When you were feeling like shit and went on that long, basically march and raided that Taliban compound with the Canadian SF guys.
Mike's like, I don't want to tell this again.
Yeah, no, I can tell it. That's a good one. Yeah, that one was in 2007. It was another time when I was working for the CIA, and we went out and like I'd had food poisoning. This was the same one where we got in that checkpoint on the bridge. Actually, I did 2 back-to-back trips with the CIA. One as an assistant team leader working under SEAL Team 6, and then the next time I was the team leader in charge of the Ranger element that was working it. But yeah, we go on this mission, or we're getting ready to go on this mission. Meanwhile, I've had food poisoning for about or some sort of gut bug for about 4 or 5 days, and I haven't eaten hardly anything in days. I'd just been laid up in my bed. We hadn't had any missions in several days. I was just struggling and just feeling nauseous and throwing up. And then we go over the Canadian special operations guys. This is like the tier 1, like the Delta Force dudes of Canada. It's called CANSOF or JTF2, I think is what they call them. They were planning a mission, and they wanted to know if we could go along with them because we had the intel piece. We're like, yeah, sure. So we planned the whole thing. We roll back, and then the team leader, who was a SEAL for us, he was like, hey, man, he mentioned something to me. I was like, hey, if you don't need me on this one, I might stay back from this mission. This is something that was only uttered once in my military career. Like you don't understand how much it took for me to just actually say, I don't feel like going on this mission. That's how bad I felt. Like,
was that Rodney Brown that led that?
No, Rodney was with us on that one. Okay. But Rodney wasn't the team leader. That was Rodney's first deployment, I think, at that point in time. And Rodney's such a good dude. But yeah, I was feeling that bad that I didn't want to roll. And he was the dude, team leader, Jeff was like, hey, dude, I really need you on this one. So if you can go, I need you. And that's all I had to say. I'm like, Roger that. I'll be there. You know what I mean? Because I've never, ever not gone on a mission, no matter how bad I felt. So we go on that one. I'm driving one of the trucks. Like, it's so bad that I'm like having to open the door on the truck every so often and vomit out of it while driving down the road. So I'm like with night vision on, driving blacked out, and occasionally ripping the door open and being like, "Ugh," and like yakking out the door. And then we keep going. We get to the spot. We walk in, and we're starting to walk in, and there's like an A&A checkpoint and some dogs, and their dogs, like they were all roided out over there back in the day. And this dog is on like a little thin, flimsy rope. And I don't know if I ever told this part of the story. I usually tell like the main combat part of it, but this was leading up to it. So this dog jumps up on this other, like this SEAL Team 6 dude that's walking point with me, because it was me and this one dude that would walk point for the group, and then the rest of the assault force would be behind us with all the CIA dudes and the Indig, and then the other SEALs or Rangers or whoever we had at the time. And so we're walking way up in the front. This dog jumps up on this dude's crotch, and it's biting his crotch. And he's backing up, trying to pull away, trying to figure out what to do. And I have a little MP7, and I just leaned over at an angle so I could get trajectory away from him and shot that dog off of his crotch. And the dude was like, "Oh my God, I thought you just shot me." And I was like, "Nah, dude, I just shot that dog." And he was like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, this thing penetrates, man. This MP7, the rounds in it, like just straight penetrate. They're like hard projectiles." I was like, "Yeah, it ain't gonna come back at you." But he was so happy I shot the dog off his crotch. Well, anyway, then we walked like another 10 or 15 kilometers.
As I would be.
Oh, it was a beast of a dog. So we walked like another probably 15 kilometers, and it was a pretty long walk. And then flat terrain, though, it wasn't mountainous. And I'm just kind of feeling crappy the whole time. And then we're going. And then as we get closer to the target building, I get around there and I get eyes on the target area. I couldn't see the building yet, but it was like this open field, and there's a levee going across the field. And on the other side of the levee is like a canal or like a river, right? So I can see this levee, and I see dudes walking across the levee dressed up in their Haji robes with like big turban wraps on their heads, which was, you see that sometimes in Afghanistan, but not a whole lot. It's not always like the big turbans that you see. So these dudes like just had the feel. I had the feeling that they were like high up Taliban dudes. So all of a sudden, it's like the sickness was gone. I was like ready to fight. I'm like, dang, it just like a switch went off. For some reason, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a legit one. You know, I don't know how it is, but sometimes you just get that gut feeling. You're like, I just have a feeling we're going to get in a gunfight on this mission. And so whatever that was shut off that sickness I had. So then we ease up. We've got the Canadian soft dudes with us, probably like 25 of those dudes. Plus we got probably 100 Indig, if at least 75 Indig that we're trying to set in. So the CIA dudes are trying to set in their Indig. Like, and just so everybody knows, these CIA dudes, like, they go out and do the stuff for the CIA. They're not like, it's not like Jason Bourne or anything like that. They're like former dudes like me that like got out and they're now doing this for the CIA. And they're basically just like paid contractors that move the Indig around. So they're like, hey guys, come over here. And like they talk to the interpreter, hey, put these guys here. They're just like literally dudes that literally put people in positions and then lead them on missions. It's nothing like super spooky or anything like that. So they're putting all their Indig in, trying to get them in position to get ready to assault this target. And then it's taken a while because there's so many moving pieces. So I tell the team leader, I'm like, hey, dude, I'm going to go up and get eyes on the target building, just to kind of see if it's what we think it is. And he's like, all right, cool. So I start easing on up, and two of the Canadian snipers walk with me. And like they weren't coming with me per se, but they kind of wanted to kind of get an eye on, I guess. And since I was going, they're like, hey, can we kind of like just tag along, I guess? So they're kind of like loosely following where I went. And then I stopped to look at something real quick, and they kind of pass on by down this trail. And then all of a sudden I hear them like yelling in Pashto. And I was like, what the heck? And I look down where they're at, and I can see their legs, but I can't see anything more than that because there's like a tree limb hanging down into the trail. And with night vision and stuff like that, you don't have a lot of depth perception beyond stuff like that. So I could see them and I could hear them yelling. I move up and I swing the tree limb out of the way because it was only like 10 feet in front of me. So I move up a little bit and I move the tree limb out of the way. And I can see a dude with an AK standing there right in between these dudes, probably 10 yards beyond them. And so I just came right up the middle between those dudes and smoked that guy because their ROE was that rules of engagement were that they couldn't shoot unless they were shot at first. But it's not that way for us. So, like, if there's a threat, we can kill it. And so as soon as I sweep the limb out of the way, I see a dude with an AK there. So I just come up and I have the MP7 again, which shoots a really small caliber bullet, 4.6 millimeters, super high velocity. But it's like a little small pistol round that shoots a really small projectile that's really fast. So I just come up the middle and I tag this dude. I'm just like, tack, 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 just drop like 8 rounds in his chest. And the dude falls down. Meanwhile, as he's falling down, he squeezes his trigger and a couple rounds went off because those dudes a lot of times keep their rifles on fire. So a couple rounds went off to the ground. And then the Canadian sniper dudes, I don't even know where they went. Those dudes disappeared. I know they dove off to the side and I never saw them again. So then I look over to the left to the target building and I'm like, dang, this is actually a legit fighter camp. Like what our intel said for the first time, it was actually accurate. I'm like, there's guns stacked up the way they would be stacked in like basic training. Like a fighter camp. And then there's dudes like crawling across the ground going to get these guns. And this dude's crawling. I shoot this one dude in the back of the head. He dies. Another dude is crawling towards some guns. I shoot him. And then all of a sudden I see this dude come out of this building and he starts spraying at me with a PKM, which is like a machine gun type thing. He's like holding it like Rambo and like spraying in my general direction. And this dude's probably 10 to 15 yards from me, but down. So I'm like up a hill on this levee where a wall is, and it's about 10-foot drop into this compound. And then he's about 10 yards away from me. So he's below me and out in front of me. And I have a mud wall in front of me. So he's spraying at me and he can't see me because it's nighttime, but he just knows that somebody's up that way. So he's spraying up in that direction. The rounds are like hitting the mud wall close enough to where like even mud chunks are like going up underneath my eye protection and getting in my eyes. Cause I was like, hey man, I'm getting dirt in my eyes. So I just puckered it in, kind of like dialed it in, like blocking out all of the other distractions to focus on the shot. And I come in, shoot that dude in the head and he falls back. It wasn't a long shot, but like there was a lot of things going on. Bullets were flying at me at the same time too. But I shot him in the head. He fell back onto a lantern that not a kerosene lantern that ended up catching on fire. It burnt up and ended up catching a bunch of Chinese C4 that was in there on fire. So that's all burning. And meanwhile, about this time now, all the CIA dudes and SEALs were all online with me. And we're just like shooting all kinds of dudes as they're moving through the house, like moving through the compound. And then we got calls from our ISR, which are the birds flying up above, like the predators and stuff like that. They're like, hey, we got movers over here. We got movers over there. We got 12 dudes maneuvering over you on here. We're like, all right. So we start maneuvering on these different targets. Well, actually, at first, we had so many guys coming after us that we broke contact. So we peeled out of there, laying down suppressive fire, dropped some AC-130 strikes on the area, did a couple runs with A-10s to neutralize some of the targets. And then we went back in. So as we go back in, we're clearing different rooms and stuff like that. And then I remember at one point in time, I'm hearing machine gun fire and like suppressed fire from us and all stuff coming off from like to the south, in generally that direction. And the team leader that was on the jet, he's like, hey, let's go check this out. I'm like, all right, cool. So me and him run towards where that gunfire is coming from to see if we can get into the fight because everything's kind of neutralized where we're at. And we're moving up there, and then we're not hearing anything for a second. So we're like, we're going to stop, take a knee. So we stop and take a knee, and I'm kneeling on the right. He's kneeling to my left. And there's a gap probably like 3 feet in between us from my left shoulder to his right shoulder. And all of a sudden a machine gun burst comes. And then I could feel the snap of the rounds as it goes by on my left shoulder. And I was like, I swear, I knew that dude just got shot. I look over and he's perfectly fine. I'm like, dang, we didn't even talk about it then. We just got up and started moving, got over there and started throwing some grenades. We ended up chunking some grenades on a machine gun team, assaulting through, killing them, pulling off. Ultimately, we killed about 80-something bad guys in like 45 minutes. But when we got back and talked about it, I told that dude, I was like, I could feel the snap of those rounds in my left shoulder. He's like, dude, I could feel it on my right shoulder. That means a burst of machine gun went right between us and didn't hit either one of us. We got so lucky. But yeah, that's that story in a nutshell there. It was a good little firefight. My buddy Rodney Brown, who was with SEAL Team 6 at the time, that was his first deployment, and he got to see some combat for the first time. So he as we say, he busted his combat cherry with me.
Nice.
That was like my 8th deployment, I think, at the time.
You got wounded in Iraq, though.
Yeah.
Was that grenade shrapnel or was that a round?
That was grenade shrapnel. I've had a round ricochet and fragment into my leg too. Never got a Purple Heart or anything for that, but got the Purple Heart from grenade shrapnel. And that was in Tal Afar, Iraq. We did a raid on a house there. We, long story short on that one, we ended up getting ready to breach the door, and the whole city, just backing up over, the whole city of Tal Afar had been just circled by regular army. And they had everything just closed off, and they weren't going in there anymore because there was a sniper up there that was like taking dudes out. Every time they'd roll in there, they would shoot dudes out of the turrets of the tanks or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they were like, hey, we can't go in there anymore. Call the Rangers so they can come bust it up. And so that's kind of, going back to speaking on this stuff, that's what Rangers did this entire global war on terror, right? So like regular army dudes would be having trouble getting into an area, or like the Marines would be struggling in like Fallujah or whatever. And they're like, hey, we can't make any progress past this area. There's like a super bad stronghold of bad guys. They would call us, and Rangers, we'd go in there and smack targets for like a week. And then it would soften everything up. And then those dudes could do whatever they want in the city for a while. That's what we did. We went for the hardest of the hardest targets. Same thing in Afghanistan. Like they would have areas where guys just couldn't make any progress, or like the big army guys or the special forces guys or the Whiteside SEALs and the MARSOC dudes would be getting their butts handed to them in certain areas where they were encountering big strongholds, and they'd call us in, and we'd send a Ranger platoon in there to smack some targets for a couple nights. We called it playing whack-a-mole, because we would smack the mole and it would go away for a little while, but then it would pop back up later on, and we'd go over there and whack it again. But that's what Rangers did during the entire GWOT, was whack-a-mole. And we were doing that in this city of Tal Afar. So we go in there, we're trying to like bust it up so Big Army can get back in there. We hit like 3 targets that night. And this one we were supposed to hit 3 targets that night. We were going to the second one. We killed a couple dudes on the first one. We're going to the second one. We pulled up to the target. We had told the Big Army to stay out of there. Don't fly any helicopters over top, because that's the only thing they were doing is flying it. They weren't actually physically patrolling it. And so we're getting ready to breach the door, and a regular Army helicopter flies over like a little Kiowa, super low. And we're like, dang, that just woke everybody up. And so all of a sudden now we hear on the radio, like, hey, we got movers on the roof. People are waking up. They're moving. We're like, all right. And it was another one of those ones that I was like, man, I have a feeling this is going to be a good little gunfight. And so, because you'll go an entire deployment and not have but 1 or 2 gunfights sometimes. Sometimes you may be duking it out every day during the deployment. You just never can tell. But some deployments, you go a month with no gunfights, and then you'll get into a couple, and then you'll go another month with no gunfights, so you never can tell. So this one, I was like, man, this is going to be something. Well, we were getting ready to breach, and the lead breach squad was up there. A buddy of mine, Mike Elliott, he went to breach the door with a donker, which is like a silent breach. That's what we were doing at the time instead of going explosive. He went to breach the door of the donker, and a bad guy opened the door as he was getting ready to donk it open. And the guy opens the door, and so he calls over the radio, compromise, and just runs in the room, which is our training, our TTP that we did, would just be to enter the room. So he goes into the room. Well, that dude, when he ran into the room, he just dropped a grenade right at the door. So when he ran in and all these other guys ran in, they took a grenade blast point blank in the door. So that happens. And then there's like a little hesitation of chaos because the second squad's like, what the heck just happened? But I could see it from where I was at, and I ended up just slipping past them, went in the room. There was like 4 doors, like 2 on the left, 2 on the right with like a little low roof. And then it goes and opens into a big courtyard with rooms all the way around, like an atrium type area with like rooms all the way around. That's the way some of their compounds were made. So I go in and I go into the room on the first room on the left, and there's one of our dudes in there. He's like dragging himself back into the room. His legs are just dangling and he's just dragging himself back. And I shined him with my tack light, and he was one of our younger dudes in E4. And he was like, "Hey, Sergeant, I'm all messed up." And I was like, "Dude, you gotta treat yourself, man. You gotta do self-aid. I don't have time to treat you right now because your wounds aren't bad enough." You know, like I could tell he was gonna be fine. He just needed to like patch himself up a little bit. So we keep flowing because we got to clear the target. Flow into the next room, and I see my buddy Mike Elliott up there, who's the other squad leader. He's like just kind of leaned up against the wall. And like he's holding his arm, and like there's blood like streaming out of his arm. And I hit him with my light, and I'm like, "You good to go?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm good. And so then I roll out of there and leave him, go into the next room. As I'm getting ready to go in the next room, I hear like this. It sounds like a grenade, tink, 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 rolling across the ground. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm getting ready to go through this room, and a grenade literally like rolls right up to my feet in the front of the door. And I had like, it seemed like I had like 10 minutes to make this decision. But I'm seeing this grenade, mind you, behind me, about 5 feet behind me, is my roommate and one of my ranger buddies laying down, getting treated by the doc because he's got grenade shrapnel, and all over his legs. His body armor has been taken off because that's the only place they can treat him at right now. And I'm trying to clear this. So I'm like, I can't let this grenade blow up right here. So I kicked it back into the room, and then I turned and dove away. So as I kicked it, and then as soon as I turned and dove away, it went off, and I caught grenade shrapnel up my backside, up into my back. Body armor stopped most of it, but I got a bunch of it in my butt and my side, which was like superficial stuff. So then come out of there, keep clearing. And then we go to clear across this courtyard to another room. And as we're pushing across, a machine gun opens up from another room across at us. And I'm about to go into this room. So I go ahead and clear on into this room, clear the room. There's nobody in it. And I turn around. I'm like, dang, where the heck is the rest of my squad? So I had like 2 dudes with me. And I'm like, where the heck are the other dudes? And I look out, and it's one of my dudes got shot by that machine gun burst. As we came across, it dropped him. And then his team leader like stayed to fix him up and was like working on him, patching him up. This dude got shot in the knee and in the left armpit. And somehow, looking back at it, that machine gun shot through me and hit him somehow. Because I'm bigger than this dude. I took up more space than this dude. Cruising through there, I'm like, how in the world did those shots miss me but hit him? It's amazing. But it did. So I go back out. I'm trying to like help get my squad gathered up, and my team leader's out there treating one of our guys that just got shot. And then all of a sudden, boom, another grenade goes off. Boom, another grenade. Dudes were on the roof with like 5-gallon buckets of grenades that were just prepared, right? So they were just boom, 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 just dropping them. I mean, like probably 100 grenades went off in that house that night. And then, so I'm standing there, and it's like boom all around me, boom, boom. I'm like, God, dog, we got to get out of here. And then I got whacked by a piece in my left arm, or actually in my right arm, and it broke my wrist. And I ended up going back out, looking at the security. I was just making sure we had already killed all the bad guys in the house at the time, but we still needed to clear the roof. So we were trying to make access to the roof, and then our snipers ended up neutralizing the dudes on the roof finally. But I ended up going outside, readjusting the security, and then I ended up noticing how bad I was bleeding, got the medic to patch me up real quick, and I ended up taking over the whole mission because my platoon leader and my platoon sergeant were pinned down in a room. Our sniper team was pinned down on the roof for a little bit, but they ended up getting their heads up to where they could get a shot and shooting some stuff up. But long story short, we ended up getting in and out of that target in about 25 to 30 minutes. We had 17 guys wounded, I believe, but nobody died. And I think we killed roughly 200 bad guys by the time we rolled out of there, because we called in AC-130 and we dropped some big bombs and basically leveled that entire city block.
Yeah. Wow.
That was a good little mission.
Yeah.
That's the one I got the Silver Star for, which is, it's kind of, I hate the award system because a lot of my dudes that were on that mission deserved more than the Silver Star that I got. And like, there's, man, I've seen so many dudes it's just horrible in the Army, especially. I mean, these awards they cost nothing. Like, just give them out. Like, when a dude deserves it, give it to him. You know what I mean? Like, you think about Vietnam, the Vietnam War. I think there was like 300 and something medals of honor given out in the Vietnam War, like probably 300 and something in World War II. Like, your average bigger, longer wars like that, it's like hundreds and hundreds of medals of honor are awarded. I've seen so many dudes that deserve the Medal of Honor and didn't even get anything for it. Nothing. I've seen, man, it's sad the way the award system works. And then you got some people in some places and branches cheating the system and actually stealing other people's awards. But the system's all jacked up.
Our founding fathers would be disgusted with the inflated size of our government. The corruption is everything they warned us against. But there's no doubt in my mind that they would be damn proud of the men and women of our U.S. military. Bureaucrats on both sides of the aisle receive relatively small salaries when they're elected into office, yet they manage to build massive family and generational wealth. Did you ever wonder how they do that? War is a money-making racket for them. Look at Ukraine. Like COVID-19, Ukraine is a money-making scheme at the expense of the American taxpayer. While we all work every day, trading our precious time for a certain income, the money they skim, taken out of our income in the form of taxes, is sent to Ukraine to fight a war that Ukraine can never win. There is no war. And much of the money comes back to the bank accounts of our politicians. I'm not taking anything away from our veterans, but Americans need to be talking about this. Our founding fathers warned us of it when our nation was born. Don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. In quoting G. Michael Hopf, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I'd like to acknowledge each and every member of the U.S. military on this Memorial Day 2024 weekend. Thank you. You all deserve the utmost respect, and you should know that we all appreciate your sacrifice.